Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, the podcast that's for normal, everyday people to talk about what's important to them. Today, we're continuing a conversation we had with Blake Fischer about politics and being a homeless conservative. Let's join in as we begin part 2 of this conversation.
Like, if an election was really stolen, what they would do to be, and that's my biggest problem with January 6th is that no one can justify it to me, because some people are like, well, it was just a riot that got out of hand, which I think is mostly what it was. I think there were some people
that's kind of my opinion.
Except that then I go, wait, but was the election stolen? And they go, well, yeah. And I go, well, then don't you think they would have a right to actually storm the Capitol if the election was stolen? I'm like, and that would be violent, right?
You know,
but
the one thing that gets me, though, is when they call it an insurrection.
I think that's
definitely,
what they, tell me your point first, because I would love to argue about this. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying, go ahead. Like, tell me why you think it's not an insurrection first.
Who does an insurrection on a government without weapons?
Well, some of them did have weapons. They
weren't, they were on their person, right? And I know DC's different, but, they weren't used.
But, like, don't you think Donald Trump's goal was to steal the election?
To steal? I don't think his goal. I think he truly believed that the election was stolen from him.
But, like, we know he didn't believe that, because we've got testimony that says he said, I can't believe I fucking lost to this guy. Like, talking about Joe Biden.
There tells you he can't believe he lost to him.
Well, but I mean, right? It wasn't like he was saying Joe Biden's, I can't believe that, like, not I can't, the context was
like, I can't believe I lost.
Yeah.
Right.
Like to this guy. Not like he really didn't believe it. Like, like you would say, like, I can't believe we blew that game.
I don't know. I just, to me, the one thing that still sticks out to me like a sore thumb about that election, and I've heard some things, so I'm kind of, in the middle, but where did all those votes go this last election?
But what votes?
The extra million votes that the Democrats had in the last election. Democrats
did not show up this time because they hated Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the most part. But they didn't like either one of them.
But they hated Trump more.
No, they didn't this time.
That was the whole reason they voted. If that's your thing that they didn't show up, but then why did they show up the last time?
Well, turnout was down overall.
But knowing
fewer Republicans voted too.
Yeah, so, but now knowing that who you call Hitler, who everybody says is now a problem with democracy, how can you stay at home and not vote?
Because most Democrats don't believe that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, most people didn't buy into that stuff. Most people didn't buy into the Russiagate stuff. Most people didn't buy into
I didn't buy into the Russiagate stuff, and
the only people that bought into that were the fringiest. Now, unfortunately, those are the loud Democrats, just like the MAGA people are the loud Republicans. But no, there's nothing suspicious about turnout going up and down. I mean, 2020 was monumental, and it was easier to vote in 2020 in the sense that we had COVID, which was an actual emergency going on, and a lot of people had to change stuff to mail-in ballots and stuff. So it was easier to participate in the 2020 election than it was in the 2024 election.
But my thing, what though? I have to say no, because the same way that was available to me to vote in 2020 here in Ohio is exactly the same way it was available to me to vote in 2025. But that wasn't the case everywhere.
Most people rolled back. In fact, that's what Biden called Jim Crow 2.0, was Georgia rolling back the laws that they just did temporarily in 2020 to still being like more lax voting laws than were before 2020. It's just that and New York did the same thing, by the way. I mean, most states were way more lenient in 2020 because they couldn't do some of the things. Like, you couldn't get an ID. Like, there were all sorts of things that were going on in states where, it was a logistical nightmare to have an election that year.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I had an election official on from Minnesota just a few days ago, and he was talking to me about the election process and stuff. And it seems like it's kind of the same here. And I actually, after talking with him, have put a little bit more credibility into our elections than I thought beforehand because of the checks and balances. And I think that's something that really the states should get out there and say, hey, elections are secure, and here's why. Here's the steps that we've taken.
But here's my problem. Here's why I know that Donald Trump was trying to steal an election. Every time he butted up against a state that said that Brad Raffensperger in Georgia and whoever it was in Arizona, and like, he vilified them, attacked them, and they got death threats for it because they said, no, our election was, you lost the election. He didn't like that. And so he demanded with violence for them to change it. And with Brad Raffensperger, it's find me 11,000 votes. And with And by the way, the second he wins a state, there's no more fraud anymore, by the way. It's like,
right.
It's like, if I lose,
Well,
it's
that's with
fraud.
any
If I win, there's no
politician. Yeah,
fraud.
exactly.
And you're right. The Democrats started it, to be fair. Like I said, every Republican in my lifetime that has been elected, George
Right.
Bush both times, and Donald Trump, they've said they stole the election. The problem is Donald Trump really actually tried to steal one. He lost every court case, all 60 of them. And there was no evidence. Bill Barr said, I looked into it. There is zero evidence that there was anything nefarious that would have swung the election your way. I mean, there's always some fraud. That's the thing is, I'm not saying there's never any fraud. It's never at the margins that would actually make a difference.
Where we're talking millions and millions of votes. Yeah.
And the thing is, what makes America so secure is that, look, Russia and China have tried to get into those election systems. We know Russia did try to get into the voting systems in 2016, and they couldn't. And the reason why is because there's 3,000 counties in right. America, and each one of them has a different system. It would be impossible unless you knew the exact county. And there was only one county that was going to swing it. And look, the Dominion voting thing, Fox News loses almost $800 million because of that, because they knew they were lying about all that stuff.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump had no evidence the election was stolen, claimed it was anyway, sent a mob to the Capitol to try to overturn the election. That is a coup. That is an insurrection, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying everyone that was there, like I said, they were lied to. And that's the only reason I have sympathy for them. But I just think that if we allow that to happen and write it off as it was just a riot at the Capitol, no, they were trying to stop the counting. They were trying to make Donald Trump, keep him be the president. And when he was not elected, that is Putin crap right there. That is Xi Jinping stuff. That is not American. Yeah, I would be at the Capitol if Donald Trump got away with that being violent, because that's treason, in my opinion. And so I think first of all, I think Donald Trump should be held responsible for it. I don't necessarily. I see. In his absence, I'd rather at least get the people that broke into the Capitol, because I'm like, look, there's no excuse for it.
My thing is, listen, you could tell anybody to go anywhere, but what they do after they get there is on them, right? And he did not say go and take over this election.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry,
he didn't stop it either. He could have stopped it immediately.
Was he going to go out there and stand in front of everybody? He sent out a tweet.
No, but way late, way too late, way too late. And it was one tweet. They were begging, but they were begging him to get on TV, and he wouldn't do it. He refused to do it. He enjoyed watching it from the White House. Everyone was trying. People
quit. Saying that he didn't. That he didn't do that. But even
that's my point.
Even
he liked it. That's why. So he wanted that to happen, and that's what bothers me.
A lot of that too is on the security for that day as well.
I guess, except that it's Donald Trump that could have. It's Donald Trump that sent them there. It's Donald Trump that could have stopped it, and he didn't want to stop it. So I say look. There were lots of failures for sure, but Donald Trump is the only one that caused it, and the only one that could have stopped it.
I think that's inaccurate. I'm just gonna disagree with you there, because he said let's go march on the Capitol. We know that there was infiltrators there.
Yeah, but
he was trying to get people to go into the Capitol.
But it was an hour. It was an hour after the first barricade was broken through that he tweeted anything. And my point is, the second the first barrier was broken, he should have been on television saying, "That's not what I wanted." Just like I said, talking about the Tea Party, talking about the civil rights. If you really thought you were wronged, let's actually sort this out. But he had already ran through all the court cases, and he lost all of them.
You do understand he's still acting as a president, right? I mean, yes, he leaves them, and now he's still the president of the United States. He's still got jobs that he's got to do. So who's to say that he could just drop everything and go? He
was sitting watching it on television the whole time at the White House. Every witness said that. People were quitting right there on the spot because they wouldn't listen to him. Ivanka Trump his daughter was begging him to do something, and they wouldn't do anything. My point is, most of this is well documented in all the hearing stuff and all the testimony of the January 6th stuff.
You could say that, but this is my belief. Individuals are responsible for themselves. Regardless of what anybody tells you, it's your actions that you're responsible for. It doesn't matter who tells you that.
But then you're saying pardon them.
Because because I believe that some of them were held longer than they should have been for simple trespassing.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that for sure, except that I just feel like you've got to.
I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that they should have been pardoned. I'm not saying 100%. I was for it until I found out he pardoned everybody. But that's what I was talking about. The people that were just trespassing or maybe nonviolent. Those people probably shouldn't have been arrested or should not still have been in jail.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my point is that there were plenty of people out on the lawn that knew they shouldn't go into the Capitol when a mob broke into it. There were plenty of smart people, And so my point is, I don't give any credit to the people that walked in there after the mob went in there thinking it was okay to do so. Because I'm going.
No, I agree.
Plenty of people knew it wasn't okay to do so.
Just what I went back to. Your actions have consequences, whether they be good or bad. And if you choose to do something, that's on you. I'm never going to you could say people, yes, you maybe, motivated me to do something by something you said, but in the end, it's still me responsible for my actions.
Yeah, but Donald Trump has never said that those people were in the wrong. He's never said that those people, he's always said that they're political prisoners.
I still believe that he thinks he won that election. I think he does, regardless of what he said.
He's lied to himself enough, and he has enough people in his ear now telling him. Because basically, what he did was he started.
I was going to, because he's the type of person that if you lie and lie and lie and lie, eventually it becomes the truth.
Right, and severely bothers me as a conservative.
I don't want this to sound like I'm a Trump lover, because I'm definitely not.
I can tell you're not.
During his first election, I was like, can somebody take this guy's Twitter away? You know what I mean? Like his first term probably would have been so much better had they controlled his Twitter, right? Not let him actually tweet. Had they controlled his interviews, or at least made less of them. He should have taken a note from Biden on that one. Less. I'm not saying that. I'm just jokingly saying that.
But it is true. I mean, he's very open to the press. I'll give him that.
Yes.
But I also think he just lies all the time. So what's the point and especially what's the point if he's never actually getting challenged by people on the right? Like I said, I just think that presidents should get from everyone. I think they should get investigated, and we should all be skeptical all the time. And the point is, no one is on the right with him anymore.
Here's what I think about politics. If you're a politician right now, I think we need to reform our country and the way our politics work. Go back to the Constitution. Say, hey, if you're a politician now or have ever been one in the past, you can no longer run for office. Sorry, you're out. We're starting fresh. I think
the problem is you can't do that constitutionally unless you put some sort of term limit on it. That would be the next Congress would have to vote for. Yeah.
Well, what gets me is it's so funny. They decided that in the Constitution, in the original articles, there was no term limit on a president.
Right.
That was an amendment. We added that after the fact, right? But we still haven't done it to Congress. And when we ask Congress, well, why can't we put term limits on you? They go, well, we do have term limits. People can vote no. But the fact is 94% of incumbents get reelected.
Yeah.
So I mean.
And the thing is, the difference there is that Congress can put term limits on the executive branch, but Congress isn't going to put term limits on their own
themselves.
Branch. Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
How in the hell can they vote for their own raise?
Right. And I actually don't even actually think it would help the thing, at least when they vote for their own raise, it doesn't kick in until they get reelected. I mean, at least there's that. But,
exactly.
But it is, and also it doesn't matter because they're making so much money in other places, as we've previously mentioned. But yeah, I don't even think that would solve things. I think it's mostly no, we'd just like you to do your job.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reason that they're always running for reelection is why they don't do their jobs. And it was funny. I had someone on the other day that was from the Solutions Party. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
But yeah, he was talking. He had some good ideas, because I'm all about. I'm very Constitution. I believe is the cornerstone of our government and the way that the people get the power. But I feel that our government and our politicians have definitely overstepped that.
Yeah.
And there's no power anymore. And I think we're at a point where we really need to reform government, and whether that be, having, getting rid of political parties and saying you can't have political parties, or putting term limits, or doing, campaign finance reform to where you can only, raise so much money during an election season. These are the things that we got to get these politicians to quit thinking about how am I going to get reelected next, to think about how can I do the job these people elected me to do.
Right. The problem with all of those things is that they're unconstitutional. And so you run into a thing where you'd have to change the Constitution to make those things legal. And Congress is not going to do that. And unless 3/4 of the states do it with the Constitutional Convention, it's not going to happen. And so to me, I go, yeah, I like solutions are, to me, every solution still goes back to, we have to fire the people that don't do the job we want them to in Congress. That's it. We could wipe out the whole House in 2026 if we wanted to. We could have 435 new people in there if we really were serious about Congress doing their job, but we are not. That's just the truth.
I don't think that the people are serious about Congress doing their job. I think a lot of people, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think a lot of people feel helpless, and that we've lost so much that there's just no point anymore.
Well, but a lot of people are voting. I mean, those people are winning 94%, right? Incumbents are winning 94% of the time. So you go.
But look at our voter turnout though, too.
No, you're right. Especially, especially you want to talk about a dip in turnout. 20 when it's not a presidential election.
Oh my
gosh. A bunch of people don't care.
It's so funny when I go to my polling place during a presidential election. I usually got to wait, 20, 30 minutes. Not bad, right? And bad. There's neighbors there, so I can talk to them. But when it's a non-presidential election year, I'm right in.
I'll go
right
in. I'll go in
vote.
at 6 p.m. and I'm the 30th person
Yeah,
that voted
isn't
for
that
like
crazy?
a local thing, like
I'm like,
like a municipal thing. Like I'll be
yeah.
the 30th person that voted there that day, like
And you're
12
like,
hours in.
I look at it this way. I'm like, we've had so many veterans go forward before us to protect this right for us to have our own government of the people, by the people, for the people, so that we can vote on who's going to be there. And it's like 90% of the population is just like, I don't care.
I think the other thing we could do that is not something we wouldn't have to change the Constitution for. I'm all for let's expand the size of Congress dramatically, like at least double it, so that because they represent 700,000 people apiece in the House now, and
yes, so 700,000 to one. That's what
right.
it
And
is.
when the Constitution was written, I think it was 30,000 per representative that was in the House. So you can't represent 700,000 people well. That's like a major city. And so I would expand it to 4,000 people if we could, because I think that the party problems disappear at that point, because you're going to have so many little weird, like people complain about, especially like Canadians and English people that are like, why aren't you parliamentary? And that was the worst Canadian accent, but you know what I mean? They're like, oh, it's such a better, and I'm like, well, it's because, I don't think that's a better system. We could have that if the House was bigger. You would basically end up with a bunch of little, like the conservatives would go to being like some Republicans and some Whigs, or, you'd have these different factions of people there, but they'd have more in common than they have apart. And because there's just no, like if you had, even if you tripled the size, just made it like 1,500 people in the House. And like I said, we'll figure out how to get them all in there with the fire marshal, or we'll do it virtually or something. We can solve that problem. Like
maybe we'll have to expand the Capitol building, right?
We'll solve the space problem. But like, to me, you got to have more access to those people. Because now,
and you made a good point earlier about counties. I mean, have one elected official per every county.
Yeah, I don't think
how granular that would be.
But again, you have to you have to change the Constitution at that point. All you have to do right now, the Congress itself could say, hey, we're going to expand the size of the House, because you don't have, it's a thing that you can do after the census. It's a totally congressional thing. It's not a constitutional change.
It's based on population as opposed to.
Just says you've got to look at the population. And so we've done it. We've expanded the size of the House multiple times. We just haven't done it in 100-something years.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah,
That's
it's been
crazy.
forever. I think it was 19 teens.
Wow.
Don't quote me on, I think it was
probably
19.
the last time they voted for us to pay taxes, right?
No, it might have been later than that. Sometime in that time. So it was a long time ago that we haven't expanded it. So that's why you've got more and more people represented. Well, so Congress could say, we're going to add 1,000 seats, and it just spreads out proportionally based on the census. So if California has more, they're going to get more people. Everyone's going to get more people, obviously, and it would be messy too, because you would have, the whole electoral college would change, dramatically.
Votes would be definitely different in the House. It'd take a lot longer to vote.
And that's fine. Like they're hardly doing it anyway. So
that's true. They're not doing a darn thing now.
And then you have to get stuff out of leadership. You got to bring stuff up from the bottom. You got to do committees up. That's how legislation used to work, and it doesn't anymore. And you've got to take the cameras out of those legislators.
I agree. Let them work, with the exception of some professions, like I said, when I was a cop, I had a camera in the car. I didn't have body worn camera, thank goodness. But, but it's the same thing. At your job, nobody's sitting there watching you do what you do every day.
I think what you do is do what the Supreme Court does, and it's just audio. I think that's because it takes away the visual element of all the stuff. And I think that you have to be a real dork like me to listen to a Supreme Court argument. Okay. And so, whereas a lot of people turned on C-SPAN or Fox or whatever, because a lot of channels were all showing the thing. And maybe there are certain situations you do want them on TV. I'm fine with it sometimes, but every committee meeting being on TV is bad. And having cameras. There's no negotiation.
Even if you could take it out of the committee, even just the committee, and just put it in the full House.
Because I'd be fine with the full House. I think that I'm okay with that. I like seeing the debate. But even then, I'd be like, what are we gaining from video? I don't think we're really gaining anything. Let's just make it audio only. People listen to podcasts all the time. If you really want to listen to it, you can.
Yeah,
but it would take away the trying to be viral thing that's so prevalent now.
The popularity, the free votes, exactly is what they're saying.
It's the I want my 1 minute, I want my TikTok, I want my and that's all they're looking for, and it's just really not helpful to the country. And I think that until people, though, go, we are sick of this and we are firing some people. I unfortunately, I do not think that will happen without a disaster. I think it will be either an economic disaster or a bad terrorist attack or some sort of thing like that.
I think you're right.
That's the only thing that would possibly wake us up out of this.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, there has to be some type of catastrophic failure from our government leaders, and like you said, a terrorist attack or, the economy tank, whatever, for people to really, I think, wake up and say, we got to do something.
Yeah, and it has to be worse than like a recession. Like a recession is just going to make people vote Democrats in 2026. It's not going to change anything about the system that caused the problems.
Exactly.
Democrats are just going, and so to me, it's I don't want that to happen. Obviously, I don't want some sort of crazy, because I thought COVID might be that thing when it started. I was like, maybe this will be the thing that people go, oh, this is like a serious thing that we should, demand government do a good job at. And instead, we just went to our sides, and one side defended everything, and the other one, it got so gross so fast, and I was like, guys, this is like, why can't we just pay attention to what's going on and then make a decision and then demand that of the government if we want to? And I really thought, and so I was like, okay, if a worldwide pandemic doesn't do it, then it's going to have to be worse than COVID.
I think the pandemic probably wasn't that, because I think a lot of people were, okay, it's a cold. I mean, I hate to say that. I know it was more serious than that. We did lose a lot of people, but, I think a lot of people look at it from a standpoint of, wow, you're making me stay at home. I can't go do things because, I'm a relatively healthy person, but you're saying I can't go out because of the, our rights were taken away. And I think a lot of people on that part were like, this is wrong. We shouldn't do this. And
absolutely,
then, being forced to take a vaccine. Now, I'm not anti-vax or anything like that.
I'm anti people being forced to do it.
Exactly. That was, so I was forced
specifically.
Yeah, I was forced to take it because I worked in a hospital at the time. And my wife was forced to take it because her company contracts with the government.
Yeah,
so
and
you
I think
see
that's
how
wrong.
the government, and the same thing. So hospitals, her company, they said, hey, we're going to take away money if your people aren't vaccinated, And
totally agree.
So we had to now my wife has all types of lady problems, we'll call it, since she had the vaccine, and she never had those beforehand. So we can only assume, now, obviously, I'm not a doctor. I don't know 100%, but I mean, put two and two together, she didn't have problems beforehand, and they showed up immediately after the vaccination. So
yeah, to me, COVID was an inflection point as far as what you got was a bunch of people that either, I think there were a lot of Democrats that liked the control they got. I think there were a lot of bureaucrats that liked the power that they had all of a sudden, and decide a lot of them were not truthful about what was really going on. And I think that if we had a better, Donald Trump look, Operation Warp Speed should be the thing he brags about all the time. I think it's one of the craziest things the government has done, like in a good way, in my lifetime. I'm serious. Like, I think it was
you're
huge
absolutely
feat.
And it gets no credit whatsoever.
Because unfortunately now the right is super anti-vax, which also used to be a left thing. That's another thing. That used to be the hippie left thing. And now it's infiltrated the right. And like I said, I'm against people being forced to take a vaccine, especially for something like COVID that just simply was not killing people under the age of 50 as much as it was people older than that. So to me, it always should have been, like kids, for example, never should have been out of school for more than 2 weeks.
No,
once we figured out kids weren't getting it, it damaged, like kids gave up weight. Kids sacrificed more than anyone during COVID.
I want to give you, and I want to give you an example of this. My niece, she's a very smart young woman, and she was in high school at the time. It was her sophomore year, I believe, when COVID hit.
Yeah,
and
that's a bummer.
She was an 4.0 top of her class student. And then they went to online classes, and she was just like, what's the point, and not being able to see her friends and all this stuff. She got depressed. She got like an F and a D for the first time ever. And it's like, people don't realize how much that actually affected our young folks just from having that social interaction with their peers,
Well, and I mean, I feel really bad I know several people that were like seniors in high school. They missed all of those things that you do in senior, and like they were just not at risk.
I graduated with my second master's degree in 2020, and I was getting ready to go to my first graduation out of all the degrees I have. I was like, I'm going this time. And they said, sorry, we're canceling graduation.
Didn't get it.
I was like, well, I guess I'm not getting one then.
Yeah. So to me, it was like we were not actually looking at the science. Like there were all these people that claimed they were for the science, but I'm like, okay, well, kids aren't getting it. So why are we punishing kids for this? This is something that they're not susceptible to.
Exactly.
And then the masks, they're effective, they're not effective. Like everyone has to wear them. 6 feet, we just made up. Like there was all sorts of it's racist to say it came from China, even though
It did come
Obviously,
from
it came from
China.
China, and it came from Wuhan, a lab leak. I mean, it's obvious that it came from a lab leak. I mean, the CIA, German intelligence now we know knew that, or strongly assumed it very shortly afterwards. They had enough evidence that showed that they thought their intelligence said that it was from China, and no one said anything, or from a lab leak. So there was a lot of stuff that, again, people just picked a side without listening to the facts.
And you know
on
what?
the
I
left
think,
and the right.
and I think that's when COVID is really, and I don't want to say that I ever really truly believed in government, but COVID was when I really lost all sense of any hope in
Yes.
government, because
And I think a lot of people
especially like at first I was like, okay, they're trying to keep us safe. I get it. Okay, I'll do this for a couple weeks. Because what was it? 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right?
And honestly, that
and then it went
made
months.
sense to me. Like,
Yeah, to me too. I was like, okay, let's try it, right? 2 weeks, I can stay at home for 2 weeks, no big deal.
Well, and I especially
Right?
at the time when, like, you hear about this thing coming out of China, and I think what a lot of people forget, especially conservatives, is that at the time, no one believed their numbers from China, because they lied about their numbers, but they had no kids that were dying from it. And we were like, they're lying about that, because we just assumed, because China lies about their number, all their economic numbers, everything. They make
their military
they try to make
numbers,
themselves look,
their economics, everything.
they lie about everything. And so we all believed that kids were dying from this. Look, I get that kids dying is a thing that triggers something in people that's different. And we go, okay, this is like, that's one of the saddest things about the Oklahoma City bombing. Is like there were 19 kids that died. So like 10% of the people, more than 10% of the people died were kids, like babies.
Yes, that is
like
atrocious.
daycare age babies. And it's tragic. And so we just don't like kids dying. Well, it only took a couple weeks to figure out that it was in our country and kids also weren't getting it. They weren't dying from it.
Yep.
Okay, China wasn't lying. So we knew that like 2 weeks later, and the kids frankly should have gone back to school at that point.
They should have. Yeah.
And if teachers, there were all sorts of ways we could mitigate if a teacher was at risk.
Even in the beginning, they said, the people most at risk are those with comorbidities or those that have other health issues, right?
And older people, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even the older people, it was generally, if they died from it, they had another, health issue.
Yeah. And it was still the thing that was killing people. I don't like when the right pretends that it was a cold and no one died from COVID. I'm like, yeah, well,
they did.
Just because they had prostate cancer, they died of COVID. Yes. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, that probably made their immune system weaker.
I think the one thing that was bad was that hospitals started putting on all death certificates COVID, because they could get money from the government from that.
Well, but they had to at least test positive for COVID to do that. And they weren't doing that on real, like if someone died of a heart attack, they put heart attack.
The funniest one that I saw that was here in Ohio was someone who died from COVID was the official reason for death, even though they shot themselves in the head.
Yeah, there was definitely some of that at the margins.
Like, hey, wait a second here.
No, there was some of that funny stuff going on for sure, but it wasn't at the numbers that people claim it was. Like, it was killing like
10 million people killed themselves.
When
and
people
then
are like, it's the flu,
COVID.
I'm like, it killed 10 times the people that the flu does every year.
And
like,
listen,
without even the fudging of the numbers, you're like, and that was the thing about Florida. She tried to claim that that's what was happening, was that they were suppressing the COVID numbers, and they weren't. Like, that was a whole hoax that she was trying to pull on DeSantis, and it was completely uncredible as anything that came. So my point is, we had this lunacy on the left and the right, and they became the loudest voices. And I think most of us would have said, like, yeah, I'll lock down for 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Let's see what happens.
Figure out what's going on. I mean,
and then let's regroup in 2 weeks, see what happened, and then let's get back out there.
But the problem, you're right. I think a lot of people lost their faith in government because I think the government failed at everything other than Operation Warp Speed, which was mostly just getting out of the way of the private companies to develop.
It took away the red tape and allowed them to do what they're supposed to do.
Now, they did some like logistical stuff, like the military was helping. Like they had an air conditioner go out at a plant, and they like got it across the country in a day and a half or something with a military convoy. They did some stuff with the labs and the manufacturing of it, where the government actually, like, boots on the ground. They did some logistics stuff to help these companies. It was an amazing feat. It really was.
It's kind of like you see what's going on in California now with the wildfires, for the people that want to rebuild. The federal government kind of stepped in there and said, okay, you guys can clear this lot. And the city's like, well, they got to do this, they got to do that. And the government's like, no, they don't. Clear the lot.
And then California government started realizing they need to do the same thing.
Exactly.
But my point is, if you can cut all that red tape in an emergency, I think we can do it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's,
I get like, and so, the one thing with COVID that I would say is coming up with the vaccine is that we definitely should have done much more testing on it, I think, before it was released. I know we were in a position where we're like, hey, where people are vulnerable. But in the end, I found for myself, I had a total of 3 shots because I had the one, which was the 2 series. And then I had to get a booster because I was still working at the hospital. And, that was considered that, but the shots just, I still got COVID. It didn't do what it was
Yeah, but
supposed to do.
they didn't deregulate any of the FDA did not do any of the stuff to that vaccine that they didn't do to other vaccines, other than they sped up the schedule in the sense that they
Yeah.
allowed them to do more tests in bulk, but they still did the required number of tests. They just did them faster than they normally would. So
and
they stacked them like
yeah. What I mean is
1,000 at a
it's
time instead of 100 at a
testing
time.
to actually make sure it was efficient in what it did.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the vaccine companies and the government really never lied about the efficacy of it.
Well, that's
It was
true.
the
It was like
media that
80-something% or whatever is what
and
they
the thing
told
is,
us.
and the other thing is that the problem was like Rachel Maddow got on TV and said, "Oh, you can't get it and you can't pass it around." And that no
Yes.
one ever like she was
You're
lying
right. You know
about
what? It
the
was
science.
the media that told us
It was
that.
the
Right.
media that told us that. Now the government did lie about stuff. Like Fauci
Mhm.
lied about masks because he thought it was a
And the
noble
6 foot
lie.
Yeah,
And the 6 foot
rule.
thing they made up, and like so, like the government lied about stuff too, and the Wuhan lab leak. I mean, that was all literally just Fauci trying to cover his ass.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we should be infuriated about that stuff. But the vaccine specifically was like Donald Trump should be claiming all the credit for it, and he should it was a feat, and honestly, it should be something he's proud of. It sucks that he can't be because there's too many lunatics in the base of the Republican Party. I don't even think it's widespread that think that they were putting microchips in people because they believe that.
Right.
And it's like, look, I do think there were certainly like I got it because we were visiting my wife's grandparents who were very old, and my mom has a lung disease and she's really susceptible. So I was like, if it helps protect them a little bit, I mean, even though I think that there are some risks, but like the risks were still less than getting COVID. Now I also realize I don't think I can get it.
Yeah, the risk to you was less than the risk to your mom or
Exactly.
whoever, and it's like because they got it and they got it from you. I mean, I can't even imagine how I would have felt.
Right, and the thing is, we like gave it to half our neighborhood because it was a sort of like lockdowny time, and a brewery opened in the neighborhood, and they had sort of a soft opening, and we all went, and my wife had it and didn't know it yet, and gave it. Like one of our neighbors was like in the hospital from it. We felt terrible. I mean, but they were like, you didn't know, you had no symptoms, like you didn't do anything wrong. My problem is that. I was willing to make that call for a personal relationship with my mom.
Absolutely.
I just don't think the government should have been telling anyone they had to do that for other people.
It should have been our call. Yes.
And I think most people would have made the right call. Like,
well, see, I probably would have too. So my wife's mother was living with us at the time. She was elderly. She was actually in hospice care, which was one reason why I didn't push back too much. Same reason you did, because I wanted to protect. My mother's got COPD. My dad's has heart problems. So it's like I didn't want to spread it to them. But, now looking back, I'm like, I probably would have never done it.
But if I was 19, there's not a chance in the world I would have taken it. And I would not have and I didn't let my kids take it. I was like, absolutely not. They're not susceptible to it. They're not in danger. They're like, and even if the vaccine carried more risk for kids than getting it.
I'll tell you
Whereas it was the opposite for most adults, especially if you're over the age of 50.
I got so sick from the COVID vaccine, from the second shot and then from the booster shot. I mean, just absolutely sick. And then when I got COVID, it was just like a cold.
Well, and what's funny is that I really think we still need to learn more about it, which it kind of sucks that Trump is like shutting down some of the funding for the research of long COVID. Because I'm like, dude, it's a real thing. Like I know people, I worked with people that like I had clients when I did the web stuff that one of them was like, I'm sorry, I've had long COVID for a year and a half and I just can't, I'm in brain fog all the time. Yeah. It's just it's a shift. I know some people that didn't have taste for like a year. I'm like, that's a real side effect.
That's an issue. Exactly.
We should try to solve that. And, but the problem was that we had I just feel like people immediately jumped into camps and no one really wanted to listen to the nuance of like, talk to your doctor. Your doctor may say it's a good idea for you. And they might say, it's not a great idea for you. And if you want to get a second opinion, get a second opinion. But like, you should listen, like, we've kind of crapped a little too much on experts, I think, as on the conservative side, where we're like discounting anyone that's an expert in anything as like, well, why would you trust them? And I'm like, well, because that's what they do for a living.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I don't think like when Anthony Fauci came out and said, wear a mask and, like you said, it was probably to save face at the end, but I think his intention was probably good. Right. To try. But again, it wasn't based on any fact. Yeah. It wasn't based on fact.
I think Americans, especially I'm from Oklahoma, which like we're sort of known for, like when the bombing happened or when tornadoes happened, it's like we were like all hands on deck. Everyone's volunteering their time. Everyone's cleaning stuff up. Everyone's helping people out. Like that's just we kind of do it. And like my dad was a pastor at the time, like pastoral counselor, and he went down to the bombing when it happened and was like had waters and stuff. And these guys kept like just walking by him, like not grabbing anything. And finally he was like, hey, like, this stuff is free, right? There's all these firefighters from outside of the state that had come in, and they're like, oh, like, no, like normally at these disaster things, there's people like selling Gatorades for $5 a bottle. It was like in the 90s. And he's like, no, these are like, you guys are digging people out of the rubble. Like, I'm not charging you for water. And they were just like, hadn't seen that before. So my point is, I think if Anthony Fauci would have gotten out and said, hey, here's the deal. We don't have enough masks. We can't get enough masks. We have to protect the people that are working in hospitals, that are on the front lines of this, that are and elderly people.
And elderly, yep.
So please, if you're not in one of those groups, don't go buy a bunch of masks, because we actually need those. Now, the other thing is the government should have just had stockpiles of this stuff. Yeah. This is not a new thing. There have been pandemics before.
Exactly.
We could have had a mask for every American into a warehouse somewhere. And so since they didn't have the foresight to do that, I think if he would have come out and said, look, masks work, but we need to save them for doctors and nurses and first responders. And those are the people that we need to have them right now. We want you to stay in your house for a couple weeks so that we can make a bunch of masks, and then you can get masks.
Yep.
I think people would have done it. I know that, like,
too.
That's where I go. The leadership matters. And if we had better leaders, and I just don't think Donald Trump is equipped to be a worldwide pandemic president. I think most people aren't, because no one's ever done it. I mean, there hasn't been one for 100 years. Now, maybe bring in some Japanese consultants. Some people live in Asia. They're like, oh, we've dealt with this.
Exactly, where the bird flu and all that.
That's why, like, those people don't leave their house if they feel a little sniffle. They're like, oh, no, I'm not getting people sick.
We're totally different here, where we're like, we'll go to work, snotting and
vomiting.
Sneezing. Exactly.
And so,
like, I don't want to use a day off for being sick.
To me, a good leader, Ronald Reagan, in my opinion, would have gotten out there and been like, here's what we need from you all, and here's what we're going to try to deliver to you, but we need your help. And the help right now is that we need you to stay home for like a couple weeks. We're going to try to slow the spread, and we're going to save the masks for the people that need them. You need a good leader that Americans can follow, frankly. And I just don't think that we're getting that quality of leader. Joe Biden was certainly not it. Kamala Harris couldn't lead her way out of a paper bag.
None of our quote unquote political leaders are good leaders. I mean, no, I can't name one where I'd be like, yes, this would be a good leader. And I agree.
Most of them have left Congress because they've been forced out by both parties, especially on the right with the sort of Trumpification of the Republican Party. Most of the good ones have been vilified. To me, Mitt Romney is one of the good ones as far as he seemed principled. I'm not saying I agreed with him on everything at all. I'm just saying he seemed principled, and he said, like, this is where I stand. And
this is one thing I tell a lot of folks. If you agree with everything one specific person says, you need to stop and look at yourself, because the fact that you can't find something to disagree with, there's something wrong there.
I also think you're lying, because no one really feels that way. They're just
like, you and I had conversations where we might have disagreed today, but it was a good, respectful conversation, and we talked about things. But it's like, we're not going to sit there and believe anything that our leaders say anymore.
Right, because I think it's been proven that we can't trust it. And I just wish if more Americans would be skeptical of, which goes back to, I just think we need like better civics education.
Yes.
In elementary, middle, and high school, because I think that, if 50% of the country doesn't know the three branches of the government, like, that's a problem. Like, they're never going to be good citizens if they can't know some of the basics. And I just also think the more you know about your rights, the more you exercise them. Like, I'm very much like I support law enforcement, but I'm also the one that's like, screw you, get a warrant. You know what I mean? I'm like, I know my rights.
Know what though, Blake? I'm exactly the same way, and I was there. My wife said, hey, what would you do if a cop came to our house and wanted to come in? I would say, you could come in with a warrant.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we just want to talk to you. You're not in any trouble. That's fine, but you could come in with a warrant.
Yeah.
You're not coming in without that document.
What's funny, this happened to us all the time in the band, because we were in a van and trailer, clearly a band. They thought they were going to get drugs every time. So they just pulled us over all the time, right? And I knew they pulled us over.
Do you mind if we take a look?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I was like, no, you absolutely can't. You have no reason to suspect anything's wrong. And in fact, they're like, why'd you run that red light? I'm like, you were sitting at a light, so that means our light was green. You were sitting at the intersection, so why were you sitting at a green light? And he just dropped it. He never asked the question again. And then it was like, can I search the car? I was like, no, you cannot. And the other guys would be like freaking out. I was like, look, he doesn't have a right to search our vehicle.
He's got to have reasonable suspicion to even think about it, and probable cause to search, which would be a smell, an odor, something like that. But
I also think we could solve a lot more problems by having more law enforcement and having them better trained and stuff. It's like, it can be both.
If I were to tell you how often we were trained when I was a cop, you would be like, you're kidding me, right? And I don't think it's changed much.
Well, and look at the Secret Service stuff that, like, they've been a debacle, and their training they're not training enough. So that's the problem.
And here's the thing that I want to ask you, but I know we've been on for a
I
long
know,
time.
we've
And
been
this has
on a
been
long time, so
awesome,
I'm
Blake.
making your show long. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it because I think we're having good conversations. I'm learning a lot, and I think we're just having good stuff that people are gonna, cling on to and hear
I hope
different
so.
views. Different but similar, right? So I wanted to ask you about because this is one thing that I know is a hot topic and will be a hot topic in June still probably, but DEI.
Yeah.
So the government now has gotten rid of all DEI programs, and I just was just wondering what your view is on that. I'm not necessarily one way. Well, I guess I know what I am, but I'll tell you. I just want to know your thoughts.
Okay,
You
so
seem
I
pretty level-headed and common sense type person. So let's
think,
hear what Blake says.
earlier we were talking about how we need a whole new set of definitions for things.
Yes.
I is like one of those things that's changed 3 times in like 5 years. And so, when you say the 3 words, of course, Democrats are really good at this. The left is really good at taking innocuous words and saying, look, it's totally innocent. It's diversity. Everyone likes
Right.
diversity. Everyone likes equity. Everyone likes inclusion. And you go, yeah, I guess I do. And then they go, but that means that we're going to like discriminate against people that aren't minorities. And you're like, wait. That doesn't like, so the intentions are fine. Like, I actually think, I think diversity of skin color is not interesting. It's not like I don't see skin color. It's that I don't think that someone's blackness or Asianness or whiteness is anywhere near the top 10 things that are interesting about them.
You're absolutely
where you grew up, how much money you make, like did you go to college? There's like a million other things that matter about a person as far as like who they are and what identifies them.
Yeah, and Blake, just to bounce off of you there, I can't even think of the last time I met someone, even of color, where I've just like, I'm going to go talk to this black person or this Asian person. You know what I mean? I'm always like, I'm just going to go talk to this guy or I'm going to go talk to that lady.
Also, none of those people have ever introduced themselves as primarily. It's not like I go, what do you do? They're like, I'm black.
Yeah, I'm black. No,
they tell me what they do for their job.
Yes, exactly.
So my point is that, like, I think the racial lens of all the sort of stuff that's going way back to like the college campus stuff leaked from the 60s and 70s being the critical race theory stuff to jumping to every boardroom and all the government too. And most of it was bullying. Most of it was, if you don't go along with this, we will cancel you. We will boycott you. We will call you racist. So most people were just trying to avoid being called racist. And my point is that, look, what Martin Luther King said was, hey, I want people to be judged by not the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And everything about DEI, when you're looking at skin color, is the opposite of that.
Yep.
Now, I'm all for like, let's try to have like gender stuff. It's like, yeah, I'm all for it. If we're in a field that it's like male dominated, like let's make sure that we're not keeping women out of it. But also, I think there are differences in genders, which I know you can't say if you're on the left now, but like there are differences in the sexes where, most women are not interested in engineering jobs, just like a lot of guys are not interested in sort of social interaction jobs.
Right. You don't see a lot of social workers that are men. Right?
It's not a rule across the board. It doesn't mean you have to do one or the other. It's just that trying to force like women into firefighting, for example, is like, maybe they don't want to be firefighters. Now, I don't think we should be rejecting anyone because of any of those things, skin color or whatever, but I'm more interested in the diversity of thought. I'm more interested in the diversity of where you grew up. I'm more interested in where you went to college. I'm more interested in all those factors because to me, that's the interesting stuff. It's that like you grew up, like if you only hang around people that you all have the exact same experience, you will get crazy and you will get more extreme. And there's lots of studies that have shown this. The more you get cohesive about stuff, you get more and more extreme in that regard. So if it's politics and you're only surrounding yourself with Republicans, the way to make yourself stand out is to be a more extreme conservative. And same thing on the left. So that's why you have all this insanity that goes on.
And Blake, I actually did a kind of an experiment for myself on social media by posting 2 different posts, same platform, same times of days, different weeks apart, but one where it was just kind of middle of the road, a post about politics between left and right, shared both views. And that was it. Got, just a handful of likes, things like that. Week later, I did the same exact post, but went extreme right. Just to see, I was just doing a thing and I got, I mean, it was like 1,000 times more than, and I'm like, but that's not who I want to be,
Right. So like same thing with me. I mean, so really early on when I started this thing, I had this idea for like a short or a reel where I was like, it's borderline mean. And so I asked my wife, like, should I do it or not? And it was just at the time, this is dating me because it's like a couple years ago now, but it was, that it was going around like a lot of women TikTok because I was like 1 margarita and then it was like something sexually explicit and 2 margaritas and it got more explicit. Well, I cut in instead of the sexually explicit stuff like Joe Biden just stumbling over his words like terribly, right? And I was like, this is borderline mean. But I was like, no, I mean, it's like him talking. It's not like you're making up a lie or something. I did it. Well, I mean, it's 4 million views like that.
Yeah, it's, you know,
And
and
like,
it is so crazy.
That's fun, but I don't want to do this performative thing where I'm just making. I didn't solve any problem there. Now, I do think at the time I was pointing out that this guy is not okay to run for president again. And meanwhile, all the Democrats and media are telling me that he is. And I'm like,
he's 100% fine. He's sharp as a tack.
I was making a point,
yes,
to some degree, but it was also like, I don't want to have to do that every day to be relevant because it's performative and it's funny. And I'm like, okay, that's fine sometimes, but.
And Blake, what I want to do is just have discussions like you and I had here today, you know, a good discussion where, hey, we may agree on everything. We may not, doesn't matter because we're both individuals, but we hear good viewpoints and things that we could take back to enrich our lives. Right. And maybe sit there and think and not be so quick to judge or quick to make a decision and just say, you know what, I realize I don't know everything. And trust me, no one knows that more than my wife.
And I don't either,
you know, but it's like, I just want to have discussions with, even if we have totally different views of opinions, I want to understand why what your thought process is and why you're thinking that way, because maybe there's something in there that I missed.
Yeah. And I don't think it's as scary as people think it's going to be.
It's not.
I think like I said, there are some people that do it very adversarially. And I think that there's a bad way to debate people. And I just don't talk to people like that. I know when I shouldn't comment back on something on the internet. I just go, this is going to be fruitless. Sometimes I just try to be funny about it because I just kind of want to make fun of how serious they're taking this thing.
Right.
To be like, there's really no need to go off the deep end like this. But yeah, then I know that, especially in person like this, well, I'm not the word in the same room, but you know,
still
via text, it just doesn't work. And I feel like people are scared because they've been told they can't talk about religion or politics, the dinner table and stuff. And so they're scared to death. They're going to offend someone. I think people should be less scared of that and also be more open to being offended. Like
exactly.
And not even offended, just like hearing a slightly different take on something. But I mean, sometimes it is offensive. Like,
and here's the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, like when we talk about government and things like that, our daily lives really don't change that much.
Especially the federal government. I mean,
exactly.
The president really has very little control.
The ones we focus on the most is the ones that probably impact us the least.
Yeah. Now, I will say the caveat to that is if Trump ever goes through with the like broad tariffs on everything, that's going to affect people's lives pretty quickly on prices really quickly. But that's why, because the president shouldn't be the person doing that. It should be Congress. You know, again, it's out of order.
But I do believe that the Constitution gives him right to set tariffs, if I'm not mistaken.
It gives Congress the right, and Congress gave it to them, and then tried to and they say, okay, but we want a legislative veto. But the Supreme Court said, no, you can't have a legislative veto. He gets a veto on you. You don't get a veto on him. You just get impeachment power. And so the problem is there's 200 laws like this where Congress gave the president some emergency powers.
And never took it back.
Donald Trump gets to say there's an emergency in Canada because less than 1% of the fentanyl that's coming into the country is coming from Canada. That's BS, and he knows it. That's why they don't talk about it very much. But that was the emergency that gave him the power. The problem is Congress, again, just won't get off their asses and pass a law that says, no, you can only declare an emergency for 10 days, and then we have to vote on if it's still an emergency or not.
Now, I like that. I'll get behind that because
they won't
too much
do
power.
It because they don't want to check the president. And Republicans would have to vote. Yeah.
If they say no and they look bad, now they're,
Right. But to me, we should not be giving the president emergency powers to tariff Canada. That's crazy. We're not in war with Canada.
So I totally understand, though, why he's tariffing Canada. I mean, when you look at the tariffs that they have on some of our products, 245% on dairy products. That's not free and fair trade. Now, on the other hand,
he wrote the last agreement.
That's where I was going to go. If that's part of the agreement that they agreed upon, I forget what the name of the deal was, but it replaced NAFTA, USA, whatever it is,
AMC, whatever it is, yeah.
But if that's what he agreed to, then he needs to go on to a different, he's essentially breaking that agreement and needs to try to negotiate a new one.
That's my problem with it.
He's trying to do that. Yeah, I get you. He's trying to do that with tariffs, but I don't actually think he's trying to get the money, is what I'm saying. He's trying to bring them to the table to say, hey, listen, this isn't fair. We need to renegotiate this deal. But
that's not ever what he asked for. But he's never asked them to renegotiate the deal.
But and this is where I think he goes wrong, is that he should have tried to lead with diplomacy and then went with the tariffs if he didn't get what he was going for.
Does that make sense? I think tariffs work in certain situations, but the Canada problem is not a tariff problem. That's not how you threaten it. It's like, the point is no one's ever going to go into another agreement with us again because they just know that the next guy can just break it. And so that's the problem, is that this is going to have long-term consequences because our allies are going to stop believing that we will have their back. And by have their back, I mean, just agree to stick with the agreement that you signed in your last administration. You
And
know,
I'm with you on that 100%. And the other part of it though
I
is
also think it won't work. I also think we'll just.
I'm skeptical. You know, I've seen some things before that, you know, can work. And the reason I'm skeptical is because every time he goes to lay down a tariff, he gets what he wants and he backs off.
But he didn't. But like, what did he get the first time? They had already agreed to those things that he said he got from them. They agreed to it before he took office. Canada already agreed to the troops on the border and all that stuff, and so did Mexico. He didn't get anything from them. He just saw the stock market tank and got scared. A bunch of corporate people came to him and
I
said,
thought didn't Canada say they were going to put a few $billions into the border protection though?
they'd already
there?
agreed to that in November with him or
Was it?
December. Yeah, he got
Okay.
nothing new from them. He just claimed he did, but they had already agreed to that in November and December before he'd even taken office because he had
Gotcha.
been meeting with them. Because remember, it was like
Yeah,
he was
meeting
already
with
the
him.
president. No
Yeah.
one was meeting with Donald. No one was meeting with Joe Biden from November to January. No one. Everyone was meeting with Trump.
I mean, we didn't even see Joe Biden for the
No.
most part, except for a couple interviews.
He was basically so he already got that stuff in November and December. So he just wants to do it because I think he likes them and I think he likes the power of being able to bully people around.
Well,
but there's not a real reason to do it, and I think it's going to backfire on him. Unfortunately,
here's one thing we'll definitely agree with on Trump is that he likes to be the center of attention. Yeah. For sure. And that's been seen. And that's one of the things that I have that ego, I think he needs to check a little bit.
I just don't think it's possible with a 78-year-old man.
Either. I mean, a 78-year-old New Yorker on that. You know, and I always go back to New York because I know I've met so many people from that era, like his era, the 80s, 90s business people that are so much like him from New York that it's just like, I know he's never going to change.
And has anyone ever known anyone in their 70s that changed? I mean, like drastically changed? No, it's just never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
His first administration, he put some more people around him that said better things to him and convinced him more like to do things that were wise to let people convince him to do. He's not doing that this time. So he's basically going with that gut instinct. And I think it will be his downfall. I think that people forget that Joe Biden was unpopular 7 months into his presidency, never recovered from that because of the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Well, yeah, that was terrible.
If Trump does the tariffs, or even if it just affects people's wallets, and that was the mandate. If there was a mandate in November, it was
economy.
The prices have gotten out of control, and he's promising to like lower them on day one. If he raises them, they're not going to wait and see. They're like, even if he does have some grand plan, which I don't believe he really does have a grand plan, I think it will blow up. But I think people will lose faith fast, and I think that you might only have, you might have 7 months to do the things you want to do. And I think that, he has some ideas that I like. He has some things that I think are the right thing to do. He's not going to get to do those things if he wrecks the economy before he gets a chance to do things like for example, he's going to be better against Iran than Joe Biden was. I know he is, but he might not have the support to do so if he tanks the economy. And that would be a shame because I think that's a national security thing we should pay attention to.
It's so weird for me because anytime the politicians, especially in this last election, said, hey, I'm going to reduce prices. I don't know about you, Blake, but have you ever seen a time in your life where prices went up and then came back down?
Also, you don't really want that. That's called deflationary. Exactly. And that's what happened before the Great Depression. I mean, you actually don't want.
I'm a realist to say I realize that now eggs, in my area, egg prices have dropped dramatically. Gas prices have dropped dramatically. Those types of things are great because those fluctuate anyway, right?
Gas doesn't count. And eggs has been 2 bird flus. So it's like nothing that anyone controls.
That was a bird flu pandemic that
2
kind of killed that one,
We've had 2
right?
of them in the last few years, right?
Yeah. But, what I think he's really trying to do, and this is what I'm trying to see, is tariffs to get money from other people to make fair trade, try to get our products into places that we could never traditionally get them. I think that's what he's trying to do with the tariffs.
Yeah, but that's just not really the case. I mean, we have benefited greatly from what the problem is. He looks at bilateral trade agreements and he says, who's in the loss here? But my example that I give that I did not come up with, but is if China, let's say that we bought $100 billion worth of oil from Canada, China bought let's do something else. We buy $100 billion worth of lumber from Canada. China buys $100 billion of oil and gas from us, and Canada buys $100 billion worth of electronics from. And when I'm saying buying, I'm saying trade. I'm saying they trade. So we technically would look like we have a $1 billion deficit with Canada, and Canada would look like they have a $1 billion deficit with China. But we're all totally even. We've all exported $1 billion worth of stuff and imported $1 billion worth of stuff. It is a first of all, the Canadian trade, even if you want to look at the bilateral thing, Trump keeps saying we're $300 billion. It's not. It's $60 billion last year. It's not. It's barely.
That's still $60 billion we shouldn't be subsidizing.
But we're not subsidizing. That's what I don't like is the term subsidizing.
No, I look at it as subsidizing because if you're not charging the same price or if your tariffs are not the same as the tariffs we have on yours, and I realize that we had an agreement, but if it's not exactly free trade where there's no tariff on it whatsoever, then we're subsidizing. If we're paying a higher price.
We're doing the same thing on their stuff. We're doing that with their lumber. So what's the difference? My point is that it is a tit for tat thing. We said we can do this so that you're, and I still don't like it. It's still protectionist. I think it's foolish. I think we'd be better off not doing it. I would agree with you.
And that's where, that's where my thing is I feel like we're in a trend where we need to be more protectionist. We need to focus on what's going on in the United States.
When has that ever worked economically?
When have we ever done it?
Ever?
When have we ever done it?
Ever. We have. We used to do it. We did it in the Smoot-Hawley Act
before World War II.
That caused the Great Depression to be much longer than it needed to be because everyone got protectionist and it caused World War II. I mean, truthfully, protectionism is what caused World War II, in my opinion. And I think most economists and or at least it contributed to it greatly. Because
it was a factor because nobody, I don't think, it was definitely a factor. But so here's my thing, Blake, is we're sending out billions of dollars to other countries every year, and especially sending them out, especially some of the stuff that Doge has found recently. When you say
we send it out, keep in mind, trade is I am buying something from another country.
Yeah, I'm talking about now. I'm sorry, I switched gears.
Yeah,
I'm talking about some of the taxpayer money that has gone to other countries to support things.
I'm fine with that, but that's less than 1% of the entire federal budget. So it's really just not the big deal.
But it doesn't matter because 1% is still 1%. If you want to save money, you got to start somewhere.
But let's not pretend that it's going to balance the budget. And Donald Trump is pretending it's going to balance the budget.
If you look at, here's the thing though, he wants to reduce spending, right? If you reduce spending and you can increase revenue through tariffs by decreasing revenue through taxes.
But if you
now have.
But hold on, if you increase taxes with tariffs, if you really get a windfall from tariffs, you are not protecting American companies.
Let me explain to you how. Because now things made in the U.S. are cheaper.
They're not, though. That's not how trade. No, that's not how trade has worked.
It is how trade works. Listen,
American-made steel went up immediately when we applied steel and aluminum tariffs because they knew if we have 25% tariffs on steel, we can raise our prices 15 to 20%, and we're still cheaper than the import.
Yeah, it's still cheaper though, right?
No, but it costs us 80.
Can add more people.
Look, the math. I'll show it. I'll send you the link. Okay, it cost us $80 billion in American taxpayer money. For example, in just Donald Trump's washing machine tariffs. Okay, so not the steel, not the aluminum, not all that stuff, because that gets even more expensive. Just the washing machine tariffs cost us cost consumers in America $80 billion. It saved enough jobs where that was $100,000 per job that it created.
Mm-hmm.
Are we willing to spend, or no, it's like 800, I can't remember the math exactly, but it was basically like every American paid like collectively $800,000 per job that was created or saved by that washing machine tariff. So we basically, we subsidized those jobs.
How do you figure we paid that when, I'm not buying a washing machine?
Because the prices of but people did buy washing machines. That's my point.
But they did. Well, see, that's where I'm saying, like, if we got rid of taxes and went to a tariff type system, you then have a choice where your tax money, right? Because now we're saying that the tariff is passed off as a tax to the consumer.
And that's what we used to do.
What you're saying.
We did that until we had an income tax.
Now I have a choice on where my money goes.
The
right?
problem
because
is
I got to purchase something.
The reason we got rid of tariffs being our primary source of income for the federal government and changed to an income tax is because it was wildly corrupt. It was Congress people rubbing elbows with certain industries and protecting their industries, but harming other. And it was crony capitalism.
I thought one of the biggest reasons we got rid of it was because we needed to pay for the war.
No, because we passed the income tax 10 years before World War I. Well, no, we started doing
1913. We passed that law.
No, that's the constitutional amendment, but
yes.
We had an income tax before that. It was in the early 1900s. So it was they were trying to move away from tariffs because this was James Madison's whole thing was like, we shouldn't do tariffs because if you're going to you should do impost instead, where you say everything from Russia or everything from China is 10%, everything from Canada. That's really an impost. It's not a tariff. If you say everything from the country, and that is actually more fair because then you can't do industry lobbying. You can't have one industry. Because here's my problem with the Trump stuff.
That's what you're saying now.
Yeah, so he tries to do the tariffs.
He's nitpicking. He's not doing a 10% across
and
the board.
he's protecting the people that are friendly to him. So what he's really doing this is
now I know why
you
think he's looking for money. I get it.
Because for example, like, look, I mean, he tried to do the tariffs. He said it's going to be on everything, and then the automobile manufacturers came to him and said, "You don't understand. Our cars go across the border 9 times before they're finished in America. This will make every American car be more expensive." Because just the tariffs that are going to come every time this part comes across the border, it's going to get tariffed 25%, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Our cars will be more expensive. People will stop buying American cars. They'll buy imports because the imports aren't tariffed because you only tariff.
What if they make it all here in the U.S. though?
Well, they can't. You can't spin up manufacturing that fast, and you
can't. No, you're right.
So my point is that none of this has been thought out well, and the point is we're better off with free trade. I agreed. Like you kind of made the point a little while ago. It'd be better if we just said. And we have been better off always with free trade. But then we get protectionists about industries that, frankly, people need votes from. The steel industry, Donald Trump wanted to win Pennsylvania in 2020. That's why he wanted to do steel tariffs. That was it. That's all it boiled down to. And then we don't really let competition happen. I am a free market capitalist in the sense that I think competition is the thing that makes it work. When the government starts picking winners and losers via tariffs, via regulation, via lots of stuff.
I don't disagree with you there at all. No.
So to me, all of it is in the same bucket. It's all protectionist, and what it does, it protects some companies and protects them. What it does, it protects them from competition. And then when we protect people from competition, the consumers get screwed in the end. That is why everything the government touches is more expensive.
On the other hand, though, too, competition, when they see that they can make a product, go to China and make a product for next to nothing. That's not fair competition. You know what I mean?
No, China
essentially exploiting slave labor.
But notice that I've not complained about the Chinese tariffs because I think the Chinese
they are the worst.
We are using tariffs as a stick to say your behavior is not okay. And we're not saying we want you to take tariffs off our stuff. We're saying you are stealing our intellectual property. You are doing espionage stuff that we don't like. You are treating the Uyghurs bad. You are sending fentanyl over here, and you're killing Americans, and we're treating that as an act of war. Notice I'm not complaining about Chinese tariffs. I think they have behaved badly. Canada did not behave badly. We agreed to this trade thing, and then Donald Trump just reneged on it. That's essentially what happened.
I do have to be honest that when he first mentioned Canada, I was a little taken aback.
And even
Mexico made sense to me because they have not, again, people are coming from their country to ours, so why would they? But, they haven't really done their job to protect the southern border either.
But they did under Trump's first administration. I mean, he got the Remain in Mexico stuff. They put troops at the border. My point is that you actually have a corruption problem with the drugs. That's the problem. Our own border agents are letting that come through. That's the problem. You've got a corruption and a cartel problem, but you don't really have a Mexico problem. You don't really even have a Canada problem. Even with fentanyl, it's all coming from China. You have a China problem. So my point is we should put all the pressure on China. And I don't think that the stuff with Mexico helps because, like, again, Ford builds a bunch of cars in Mexico, not because the jobs are cheaper there or because they wanted to outsource the labor because they're greedy bastards. It's because no one buys cars anymore in America. We buy SUVs and trucks. There's no point in making them America, but do you know who does buy cars? Mexicans. So they build it where they sell it because it makes sense. It makes economic sense for them. And that American company, by having a free trade agreement with Mexico that says we're going to build cars down there and blah, 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 that benefits Americans. Like, that still employs Americans. It still makes American. Look at Apple. Apple designs all these brilliant things. There's $1 billion company. They build none of it here because it's not efficient for them to build it here. It's better for them to come up with the amazing ideas and designs and the hardware and the software and all that stuff. And then, have people that are good at manufacturing electronics. They build it in a bunch of different Asian countries, some for the chips, some for this. And that is better for America. That we have that powerful company. We have all those jobs. We shouldn't be pining for manufacturing jobs. They pay less.
And that's one of the things where I agree with you. And I had a conversation with another gentleman a couple of weeks ago. And, one of the things that he said, and it just kind of stuck with me, and it's just common sense. But when, we talk of older folks, like our parents, like baby boomers, right? They think of, hey, let's put these tariffs on. We'll bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So let's say that happens, right? It does bring manufacturing back. Yeah. Manufacturing today is not like it was when they were in the manufacturing jobs.
Not at all.
Most of it's automated.
We've gotten way more. Here's the thing. We manufacture more stuff than we ever have, just with fewer workers.
People. Yep.
Because we've gotten more efficient. We've also gotten more productive.
And technology is advanced.
And here's the other thing. It's not even just like those jobs are harder than they were in the 50s, not backbreaking harder, but they are. You sometimes have to have degrees to work. Intellectually, it's harder. You can't just, it's not like
because
the assembly line at Ford.
You got to know the machine. You got
to know how to fix the robot.
Machine. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So like, my point is, these are better jobs now. They pay better. They are better for our economy because we make more money when we. And the thing is, cheap stuff. When you don't want some stuff needs to be cheap because people couldn't afford it otherwise. Like the reason we all have 60-inch flat screen TVs.
Yeah, you're not going to pay $30 for a comb, right? You're going to say, no, that's nuts.
Look at all our electronics. We would have none of the electronics we have if we had to build them all in America. Just wouldn't happen.
You're right.
We're not set up for it. And that's okay. We're really good at other things. Oil and gas, we have a ton of. We should be exporting all of it.
Are you using a Shure microphone there?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So me too.
Built in China.
Could you imagine these things are expensive built in China? Could you imagine what they'd cost if they were built here?
Yeah, they're $450 new from China. And the thing is, I don't want Shure manufacturing stuff here. I want them designing cool stuff and having employees.
Jobs. Yeah.
Good paying jobs. Service jobs get paid more now than manufacturing jobs.
I get you.
To me,
so that makes sense because, I guess part of my thought was, and I guess I didn't read into it enough with these tariffs, was that it was going to be across the board, like 25% tariffs or, he said, what is it? April 2nd?
That was the idea. My point is that's even foolish with someone that we're not trying to whip like China. The point is we need China to change their behavior. We're not asking Canada to change their behavior. Also, by the way, that $60 billion debt or whatever we would say, or most of that is oil and gas, which I think we all agree we would rather be buying oil from Canada than from Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, right?
Actually, I'd rather buy it from the U.S. myself. But
well, I know, but we don't produce the kind of oil, the crude that we need. Canada does. So for diesel fuel specifically, we have the light sweet crude in Texas. That's what so we don't actually need to refine that for our diesel. The crude, the thick black stuff is what Canada has. Gotcha. We have some in Alaska that we should tap into for sure, but Canada has that stuff. So we buy it from Canada and then we sell our light crude to the people that want the light crude. Again, it's about going, we don't have the refinery for it. We don't want to refine that kind of oil because it's not what we need. We need diesel fuel, and diesel fuel requires the thick stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's us pulling stuff out of the ground and then selling it to other people. That will stop if we put tariffs on other countries because they put retaliatory tariffs on us. And what it does is it hurts manufacturing. And we have very recent data from, I'll send you some stuff, but any economist will tell you that the steel and aluminum tariffs basically raise prices for everything made of steel and aluminum in America for Americans. And for example, so a Japanese car, if you buy a Mercedes, that's a better example. We taxed all steel and aluminum, but we cannot produce the amount of steel and aluminum that we need for manufacturing in the United States. So you have to import steel and aluminum at 10 or 25% tariffs, but you don't to build a car in America, but you don't have to pay that money on that steel when that car is built in Germany. So what do you think happened? All the non-American stuff was cheaper than the American stuff because they had a 25% bump in their raw materials when they were building a washing machine or anything that had steel and aluminum. And most people don't. The thing is, it's not like we give money to Canada and they give money to us. This is billions, well, I guess hundreds of millions of individuals and companies making decisions that work for them. And sometimes I buy the thing that's cheap from China. Sometimes I want, even if it's not made in China, most electronic stuff just is made in Asia. That's just,
it is.
They
most
make Japan, South Korea.
Everything
Most of it
probably working on right now is made in Asia.
Everything is made in those countries. And, but I'm going to buy an American made guitar, so it's it depends who's good at what. And I'm going to buy, if it's the best thing and it's from China, I don't care. China,
in the 90s, right? When we all bought Sony because Japanese electronics were the best.
And that's the thing is, Donald Trump in the 80s thought that we should be tariffing Japan because he thought they were going to take over the world and stuff like that. Well, it didn't work out that way. Japan's economy is struggling mightily because they don't have enough young people and they don't have enough workforce. And there's all sorts of problems that Japan has. And we're heading that way too.
Well, we are.
So to me, it's just, it's a thing he likes and people are searching for the good in it. And to me, I just look at every historical example and go, it's never worked. It's ever done is raise prices, and it might protect some jobs, but it will cost all of us to protect those jobs. And I just don't think, I think there are better jobs than the steel jobs that would get lost. Or for example, Joe Biden blocked the Japanese company buying the steel company and said it was a national, said it was a national security issue. It's Japan.
And that was one of the things though that I wondered too, is some of these core things, don't you think we should get most of like steel and aluminum? Don't you think we should be the number one manufacturer of that for things in this country?
Not if
I'm not talking worldwide, but we should have some type of that infrastructure here, because what happens if, say we're getting steel, I don't know, I'm just saying, let's say we get steel from China and then we have a war with China.
Well, that's why I think,
SOL,
that's why I think you should be very careful about what you, when you trade with people that you are an enemy with. I think the problem is like when someone is our adversary, we do need to be more careful about how we trade with them, which is why we have no economic ties to Russia whatsoever. Okay. And that's the way it should be. China can't decouple from us and we can't decouple from China. It's super complicated. Obviously, I'm not an expert in that kind of stuff, but I know that like
for sure.
they very much rely on us and we very much rely on them. And it would be mutually destructive for us to cut off those spigots to American companies. That's why it's interesting to me that China is the one that we actually need to be being disciplinary with in some sort of way, but we're going to tariff them 10%, although he added 10% to it and made it 20. But then Canada, we're giving 25. They're like clearly our ally, and we should not be treating them that way. Because if we do, they're going to retaliate. They're going to have to because they're trying to protect their economies. And I love that Donald Trump's like nationalism is like, do you not believe that other people might be nationalist?
Yeah, I mean,
like, you think Canada's just going to roll over?
To my Canadian friends out there, to our Canadian friends, right? We don't really want you to be the 51st state.
No, I have no desire for that.
We want you to maintain your own individual independence and be your own country. We love Canada, and I think, I don't want to talk for you, Blake, but I'm sure you're the same way.
I mean,
we're like brother and sister, not saying one's the other, but we're like siblings.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be tariffing them.
Yeah, we should be getting along.
Now, if Donald Trump wants to go, hey, we need you to spend more on military or something, but he's not asked anything like that. He's not asked anything about national security.
That we know of.
Well,
right? I mean,
we would know
everything
because he talks about everything.
He does, but not everything.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't appear to me that he has any real plan. He just says, because he goes, we're going into this, there's nothing they can do.
I'm interested into seeing what the whole goal is behind it.
I don't think it's
really been. I don't think it's really been articulated.
But I don't think he has a plan. I think he just likes
just to say, everybody's got to pay their fair share, which I don't disagree with. But I think
he just fundamentally doesn't understand how tariffs really affect the economy. I think that on paper, like not even on paper, when people talk about it out loud, you go, okay, that makes sense. But he claims it's going to raise a bunch of money in taxes, and he claims it's going to protect American manufacturers, but it can't do both at the same time. It can only do one of the two, or some combination of both, but it can't do both at 100%. It's just not possible, because if people are still importing stuff, people aren't buying the American stuff. And so it's not going to do the job of protecting stuff. And like I said, the prices are going to go up for people.
I mean, and the only way that it would protect American jobs but still hurt Americans is if the import products went up so expensive that the American products, were the better offer. But even like you said, just like we know, I hate to say it, you go into business, obviously you might have a product or something, but the end goal is to make money, right?
Right.
I mean, that's it. So,
and the thing is, free trade tends to make, or at least like reasonable trade tends to make everyone richer, because I mean, you just look at like post World War II. Obviously, we had a significant advantage because every other country in Europe was in rubble. And so we were the only people that could manufacture stuff, but we quickly got them built up and stuff. And the truth is, like, the whole world benefited from the last 80 years of America being the military strength of the world and trying to keep the world in check, and economically that too, trying to encourage free trade and trying to say, like, look, I mean, we only have a Navy because we were protecting shipping lanes. That's the reason we created the Navy in the United States, was to protect shipping stuff. So like, I'm all for Trump, like taking out the Houthis. Like, I'm like, yeah, they should be obliterated because they're messing with free trade. And once you start doing that in one place, that can spread
and
to all the sea.
What's so weird on that too is, like, I was reading an article today, and you think of the shipping problems and you're like, oh yeah, that's been happening for a couple months. And then you look at it and see it's been happening since 2023.
Yeah.
That they've been attacking our ships and
and we're just like trying to swat stuff out of the air, and we're like, no, you should hit the guy that's shooting the missile at you.
At some point, if they don't get the picture, you got to make them get the picture, right?
So to me, on the trade thing, it just seems like he likes tariffs and he likes the idea of them, and he always has, and it's the only political principle I think he's ever really had. And so he's sticking with it because, again, old people don't change, and I think he thinks they can do stuff that they can't. He thinks they're magical and they're just not. And every economist is telling him that, but he just thinks they're wrong.
And the only way that could even possibly remotely work 100%, and this is what I'm thinking, is that if you did the tariffs, because I'm a realist, prices are going to go up, right? And the only way that I would be approved of, an approving voice of that would be if you do the tariffs. Okay, I understand prices are going to go up, but now I'm not paying taxes. That'd be the only way, but I don't see how they could do it.
He's not getting rid of taxes.
Our government has a spending problem. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah,
right?
and look, even if he did, let's just say that theoretically it didn't even wreck the U.S. economy. Like, no one did any retaliatory tariffs. They still couldn't make enough money because he could he could get rid of every executive branch. He could fire everyone in the federal government, and he still not would get all of their budgets, everything that's discretionary. Like because he's obviously he can't do anything. He said he won't do anything to Social Security, Medicare, those kind of things, and veterans benefits. And so he said he won't do anything to DOD either. So you could take the entire rest of the federal government and you cannot get to $1 trillion off of this year's budget. You can't. We're $2 trillion in debt $2 trillion deficit every year. He can't even get halfway to the deficit. He cannot balance the budget, and that's if he fired everyone in the federal government that was a discretionary agency. So basically, not the DOD, but everything else. He can't do it unless we've got a spending problem. You're absolutely right.
We do. Absolutely.
We have to stop spending money, and we can't cut. It's not foreign aid is not going to do it, and neither is getting rid of the Department of Education. Any of this kind of stuff. You have to do deep work to Social Security. You have to do Medicare. You have to talk about all that kind of stuff. You cannot do it with discretionary spending, but everyone's pretending you can. It is not possible. You could, like I said, there's not enough waste, fraud, and abuse. There's just the math doesn't math.
I'm a realist, and my thing is, though, I do like the idea of going in and getting rid of some of these programs that we're spending money on. That
I'm okay with the ones that are ridiculous too. I'm just saying,
absolutely, and
they're not the mission accomplished banner.
Right.
Elon Musk is pretending it's mission accomplished, and I'm
not.
going. That is, and he's been overestimating stuff too. They thought they cut $8 billion. It was $8 million. $8 billion and $8 million is a big difference. It's 1,000 times you overestimated.
But then I did see one where they did the opposite though. Wrote $8 million in savings, and it actually ended up being $8 billion.
Yeah, but I've not seen enough receipts to show that they've even saved $16 billion. I've not seen the proof
and my thing is
happened.
Like, I don't know how do we see really? How can we see the receipts?
Well, they're claiming they're posting everything, but they're not.
They post their stuff on Doge, but it's just like it looks just like I don't know even what to say, like a screenshot.
But they're also not really. Elon's claiming a bunch of stuff that's not even on that Doge website, and that's like one of those things that was in that and then he revised that 8 billion to 8 million, and it never changed the total saved. So it's like, there's some really dumb math going on, and also I don't think the president can do this stuff. A lot of I think it's going to require Congress in the end. Like, I don't think he can actually I think that the will get to the Supreme Court, if it hasn't already by the time this airs. Cut this out if it does. But I think that the Supreme Court will say, no, the president does not have the ability to mothball an entire agency and get rid of their budget. If Congress says they've got to spend money, the executive branch cannot not spend the money.
Yeah. So that's, the thing that gets me, and I think you're right. And this is where I would go with that, is saying that I think he has the right to make personnel changes.
Absolutely.
I think he has the right to hire and fire everybody, whichever way it needs to be. But as far as getting rid of actual departments, I think you're right. Like, the Department of Education was created by Congress, so
and even the funding of it, I don't think
that's going to have to disband it. Right?
I don't think legally he can do either one. I don't even think he can say.
I think he could say, we're not going to pay for these dumb things because they're stupid and it's discretionary. But I don't think
he can even do that.
I think he can.
Not if Congress said we're designating $1 million to this specific thing,
but
then he can't
that
do
specific thing, correct.
Yeah.
But if it's discretionary and they say, hey, this money just has to go to
you're right.
the Department of Education, then he can say, well, I'm not spending it on that.
But that's not how most of this stuff is in this USAID thing. It's like money set aside.
But
I mean, like, look, he cut down a program that saved 26 billion lives, or not 26 million lives, like the AIDS stuff, and he just cut it. Like, my point is, like, why do that?
They reinstated that.
No, they didn't.
Yeah,
people
are
still not getting paid. No, they said they did, but people are still.
I thought they.
No, if you go read, like, there's still people that are going, I know he said he restated the funding, but we had to fire everyone and we still don't have any money. So,
well, now that could be it.
So my point is,
now we're there to process it.
I'm all for looking at under the hood of everything. Like, I don't want waste, fraud, abuse. I don't want to pay my tax dollars for stupid stuff, but he just went in there with a chainsaw and said, we'll clean it up later. And I think that there will be lives lost because of that. And I think that's foolish, and I think it will bite him. And it was unnecessary.
Instead of going in with a chainsaw, he should have gone in with a scalpel.
Exactly.
And been more precise.
And it would have been, and I think everyone would have been on his side, because what are Democrats going to defend? Like, doing the Sesame Street in Iraq? Like, no, they're not going to be able to defend that. I think we'd all go, no, we don't want to spend money on that. But saving kids from AIDS in Africa, especially when it's like, not even 0.1% of the budget. I go, that is worth America being the people that are out in the world being the good guys. We want people to think of us as the good guys.
And you know what?
We are in that competition with China.
Yeah. One of the things that got me, which really blew my mind, and this is not regardless of how you look at these things, but we gave, like, I don't know, $1 million to Ireland for a transgender play.
Yeah. That's the stuff where I go, nope.
Okay, Now, number one, I'm a Christian and, I am conservative, so I don't necessarily believe in funding that sort of stuff. Hey, if you privately want to fund it, that's great. Go right ahead. Do what you do you. But why would our government give money to another country to pay for something that we don't even pay for here?
Right. And also, here's my other point. We should only be doing that with things that we're trying to win hearts and minds of people that Russia or China would otherwise.
Yes.
And they're never going to fund that kind of thing.
No.
They're not going to fund the Muppet Show in Iraq. They're going to fund like roads and bridges and stuff and weapons and things like that, or even the aid stuff. Like they'll do that kind of stuff because look, China, it was cheering on the USAID stuff. There's a reason they're cheering that on, is because they're going to swoop in there and they're going to, the story will be in these third world countries where we were doing stuff like saving people from AIDS with medication or tuberculosis or these kind of things. If the Chinese come in and the story is going to be America abandoned us and the Chinese came in and saved us. And that is going to be a problem for us geopolitically in the future. And that is going to that's my point, is that we're not thinking of the ripple effects of these things. And it's not that I disagree with them in principle. I go, yeah, I want to shrink the size of the federal government significantly.
Yes.
I would love to actually take a chainsaw to some of it. I think some of it can just be shuttered, but I think Congress has to be the people that do it legally. And I would cheer it on. But my point is, I think that we will become the global villains. I think we're already becoming that, with us siding with Russia and the Ukraine thing, with us slapping tariffs and like trying to destroy NATO and talking crap on everyone except for dictators. I think that will have a long-term ripple effect, and just ripping up trade agreements that he signed. I think no one will ever trust us again. It'll take a very long time. It won't be like someone gets in the White House in 2028 and they go, okay, everything's good again. They'll go, no, because the same guy that signed the trade agreement ripped it up immediately afterwards. Like, we don't trust your voters anymore. We don't trust your Congress. We don't trust anyone in America. I think that's where we're heading. Well, right, but I think that we will notice there is a huge problem when America is not in charge of the sort of economic freedom in the world and actual freedom of, like, someone's got to draw the line and say, like, since World War II, we've had a line in the sand that says you can't invade another country and steal territory. You just the world is not going to stand by that after what happened in World War II. We're not going to let that happen again. And to me, Donald Trump is saying, yeah, we'll let Russia do it. Yeah, we'll let China do it. We'll let anyone do it as long as they're not doing it over on our little part of the world. And to me, France and Germany and all these countries, we just think that we can treat them badly, and then they're going to do what we would want them to do. They're going to do what's in their best interest. And what they may have to capitulate to China, because they do not have the might that we have. They do not have the interconnectivity that we have. China can actually hurt France really bad if they want to, if we don't have their back. And I think that's just going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
What do you see happening if we do just take the stance of, we're just going to sit back and let the world deal with themselves?
I think we will have another world war. I mean, I think it's not, there will be chaos. There will be.
Yeah, I don't deny that there will be chaos, but at some point and this is, I feel bad about saying this, but at some point we got to stop being the world's police if they're not going to work with us.
But it benefits us to be the world's police. I think that's what most people don't understand, is that we, for example, what we spend in Ukraine, dollars wise, is pennies on the dollar of what it would cost us to go to war with Russia ourselves. So we're basically saying, here's some weapons, Ukraine. You guys are willing to fight.
But now we're just like Iran and having proxies fight our wars.
Well, but not
so
really,
how is that
because
any different?
Well, to me, it's not. To me, it's totally different, because the difference is Iran is funding those things entirely, as far as they spin up Hezbollah, they spin up the Houthis, they spin up Hamas, and their goal is basically the whole time they're like, we're going to attack Israel, for example, or we're going to attack Americans. It's death to America. The goal is to end Israel and America.
Right.
We're just doing that via other people so that we sort of have some, because if Iran shot a missile at us, we blow them out, we'd blow them up,
We hope
it's a little harder, but the difference is Ukraine got invaded and then said, if you give us weapons, we will fight these guys and you won't have to. And we go, that sounds like a great deal. So to me,
at some point though, enough's enough.
That's fine, except that why is that Russia gets to decide what that is?
I'm not saying that Russia gets to decide what that is.
But Donald Trump is. I mean, he's capitulated everything to Russia. So in my opinion, at some point I go, the dollar amount has to get way higher than it is right now. Because to me,
not for me. We've already spent too much money for people dying.
Okay, but
I
what
don't
if
think we should be spending money on
okay,
putting
but think
people to
about
go
this.
die for a war that they're never going to win.
But people who? Would you rather it be our people?
Our people are not in a war right now, though.
No, but they will be, I
See,
think.
but there's also a lot of people don't realize, and I've seen some research. I'll have to bring it up and find it for you, Blake. But there was an accord after the USSR broke up that any nations that dissolved would go back to Russia. And Crimea was one of those territories.
Yeah, but that's not really how that worked out. I'm not totally sure about this, but like that gets cited a lot. But the problem is that the real treaty was the one that we signed with Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine had the third largest stockpile.
Well,
of
and then we
nuclear
broke
weapons.
that because we kept trying to move NATO east.
Russia broke it. Russia broke it.
We took
Russia,
NATO east after the 90s when Bill Clinton
was not
said,
part, but that wasn't part of that. That was not part of that deal.
That was a deal afterwards, though.
No, my point is Russia broke that deal by invading Ukraine later in 2014.
But rightfully, because of those previous accords,
no,
that was supposed to be Russia's.
No, it wasn't. It was never supposed to be Russia's. It was always it was an independent Ukraine, and we said
no. The area, because it was an independent country, when they fell, Ukraine said we're taking them. And
but that's how wars work.
Back to Russia.
That's how wars. No, Ukraine was not supposed to go back to Russia.
They didn't. No, not Ukraine. I'm talking about the areas that Russia's trying to annex from Ukraine.
I don't buy. I mean, I've read enough about this stuff that to me, there's no justification that doesn't go back to Russia broke an agreement. Russia broke every agreement first before any of those other things happened.
I've seen it the other way. I've seen the U.S. broke the agreement.
Is this the provoked?
NATO.
It's the provoked book.
No. This was an article I read.
That one's been brought up a lot to me, so I want to get it so that I can better argue with it, because I'm like, I haven't read the book yet, but everyone keeps bringing up the same things. That then I do a pretty quick Google search and go, no, actually, Russia broke it in 2003.
And I'm not saying that, yes, Russia did invade what we know as Ukraine, right?
Right, but
they did invade.
But what was the justification for it 2 years ago, other than trying to take over the whole country that was independent?
And that I don't see. The justification when they first started the war was that these were Russian sympathizers that wanted to be back with Russia.
It's not
That's
true.
what Russia's saying.
But that's not true.
So
we know it's not true.
You asked what the justification was.
I know, but my point is, but what's the justification for Trump and the Trump supporters that say this is
my justification?
Like we were in the wrong.
My justification is I don't give a shit who's right or wrong. The war needs to stop. We need to stop funding it.
Right,
period.
but if we stopped funding it, and Russia takes over Ukraine completely, which is what their goal is, right?
Then Europe needs to get in there and do what they got to do.
Okay, but what if we've got a treaty with NATO, and the country between, there are Russian territories that don't touch you got Russia, but then you've got some other territories that are Russia, but there are other countries in between them. They're non-congruent. Mm-hmm. Poland is one of those.
Yeah, right.
So you don't think Russia's going to say, oh, you know what? We need to connect these two countries that we own, this other part of Russia. So we're invading Poland and we're going to make a road through here.
I think Poland's ready for that. So
we have to go into Poland if they get attacked by Russia. By Article 5 NATO. Okay. So if we could spend the money right now to let Ukraine try to fight back Russia, or we can get some sort of deal that says Ukraine is independent, and I'm fine with if Europe provides more of the weapons. I'm fine with nuclear arming Ukraine at this point. But if we could spend that money now, or we could say, okay, Russia takes over, they win the war, and then we're going to have to send troops, and it will be our blood and treasure, and it will cost way more than anything we've spent. We've only spent, I think it's $80 billion in Ukraine. It is not very much. Donald Trump likes to exaggerate it.
Well, no, we've spent $80 billion in Ukraine, but we've also spent money locally to build these weapons.
Almost all of that is to build the replacements for the weapons. So if you talk about protectionism, it's literally a jobs program. The money we send to Ukraine is not really money that we send to Ukraine. We send them old weapons and then pay our people to build new weapons. It's a jobs program.
But it still costs us because those products we no longer have.
I know, but we are buying them. They are buying them from us. Our government is paying for them at the cost of replacement. So we're selling them 20-year-old weapons, and we're paying manufacturers to build new weapons.
But right now you do know that our military has an ammo shortage right now. Right?
I know, but not specifically but that's where I also go, again, let's get the corporate stuff, is like DOD needs to change significantly. We only have 5 contractors. We had 500 at the end of the Cold War. It's too few people. There's not enough. There's not competition again. So, but my point is, I think it's going to take a crisis for us to realize that I think it should already be a crisis, because China is building naval ships at a pace that we cannot, because we have too much red tape and too many unions and all sorts of stuff in it. My point is, but when talking about Ukraine specifically, the money that we are spending right now will be a drop in the bucket compared to what would happen if Russia goes through Ukraine and invades a NATO country, and we have to defend them.
And I'm not saying we just abandon them, but I am saying that, yes, we should be pushing for peace.
Right, but we should be pushing on Russia, not Ukraine. Ukraine is not the agitator here. Russia was the bad guys. We should be putting pressure on Russia, not Ukraine. And Donald Trump is putting pressure on Ukraine and not Russia. He's got it all backwards.
But I look at it this way, though. Ukraine, let's take it back to when Zelensky came to the White House, right? He was asked to come with an idea to go with peace. And instead he came and asked for money, right?
But he didn't come and ask for money,
he
really.
He said, ask for money. He did. He said, I need money to keep fighting this war. And they said, no, we want to talk about peace.
Well, I mean, you don't think he wants peace, but it's...
No, because it's a big money laundering operation.
It's not money laundering. He's getting weapons. How is he laundering money?
Still going over there.
No, not some, but not. It's mostly weapons.
It is coming back.
You think he'd rather?
Politicians.
I think it's ridiculous to say that he wants to stay in war and kill his people.
Have you seen him in an actual combat situation? You've seen him in combat zones, but not in an actual combat situation.
President, you wouldn't see Donald Trump in
but if his country's in such a bad shape, he's going all over the place looking for money instead of being there doing what he needs to do to protect his country.
That is what the president is supposed to do in that situation when you're a small country trying to defend against Russia, a superpower.
I mean, I do have to say Russia's kind of disappointing in this endeavor because
Russia are the bad guys. There's no one to blame. For you to talk about corruption and money and stuff like that and not say the same thing about Russia, that's what's really bothering me.
I'm not saying anything about I'm not saying Russia is wrong or not. I'm just saying the war needs to end. I don't care how we end it.
Well, I know, but I think that's the wrong way for America to look at it.
But it doesn't matter how it started. It doesn't matter who started.
It does.
Who did what.
It does.
That could be handled after the fact. Right?
No,
if you need to bring someone up on war crimes, you could bring them up after the fact. But the war needs to end first. The killing needs to end. That's needs to stop.
That's fine, but you need to put pressure on Russia to stop it. My point is Russia is the aggressor. That's the person you put pressure on to stop it. Ukraine doesn't have the power to stop it.
Didn't we just put more sanctions on Russia?
We basically almost can't sanction them anymore because we have almost. So my point is, I don't think we.
So
but Donald Trump is talking.
No, do it.
Donald Trump is talking about easing the sanctions. That's what he's trying to use as a carrot to get them to come to the board. And I'm saying that is the wrong.
If they come to the board, though, right?
But they won't. I don't think you reward the behavior of invading another country by giving people economic prosperity.
I don't look at it as So that's not a reward.
Do you think that's what we should have done with Hitler in Germany when he invaded Poland? Do you think we should have been like, what if we give you a bunch of money?
When he invaded Poland, we didn't do nothing.
Right, but the world.
So I mean, I'm just saying that's how we should be.
Do you think
that's my thought?
Do you think that would have ended the war?
We got so much crap that we can't even handle here at home. We need to let the world worry about themselves for a while and start fixing what the United States.
I know people say that, but that will come to our borders if we let that spill into where we're sending our troops into NATO countries because Russia has invaded Poland. Like that's going to be my sister-in-law is joining the Marines. She's in the Naval Academy right now. Her life is on the line if we have to actually go to war. And that's what I want to avoid. And I think it's worth spending some money to not go to war. I'm not saying blindly. You don't give in to the guy that
I don't see it as giving in. I see it as let's get to the table and let's negotiate. They're the two that have to negotiate the peace deal. We're just a broker in the middle.
I agree, but we're putting all the pressure on Ukraine and not Russia. I agree with let's get it over with.
Because we have the most leverage on Ukraine to get this over with.
But they're supposed to be our allies. That's not how we should think of the people that we signed an agreement with that said
if they were truly our allies, they'd be in NATO, right?
No, but here's the thing. If we sign an agreement that says if you get rid of your nuclear weapons, we will defend you if Russia attacks you, and then Russia attacks you and we don't defend you, we are the bad guys. That's what I'm saying. We are the evil people. If we sign an agreement with someone and then saying, by the way, you have no way to protect yourself from a nuclear power, we're saying we will be the nuclear power that has your back. And then we turn our backs on those people, we are the bad guys. And that will come to our shores. It will come to our shores in the form of terrorism. These countries want to destroy us. China does not want us to be a world power. Russia doesn't want us to be a world power. Iran wants us to all die. That will come to our shores. We cannot just blindly look away and hope that because Russia is bigger or China is bigger than these other countries. They will capitulate Europe into what they want them to do if we abandon Europe. And that's where I think we're heading. And Donald Trump doesn't even have to leave NATO for NATO to get the word that like we can't count on the Americans anymore. So we've got to do whatever we've got to do to survive. That is where we are heading if nothing changes. And I hope I'm wrong. Like I really do. But I just don't see how it won't turn out that way. You just go, okay, if we do that to them, they're not going to trust us on trade. They're not going to trust that we can back them. If we don't defend Ukraine and Israel.
You just said everybody hates us and wants us to die. So what's the
No,
difference?
those four people, Iran, Russia, and China and North Korea want us to. My point is, if we don't have the backs of the people, like we are a superpower. The people in NATO, all of Europe, lots of countries are what we call our allies. Canada, Mexico, pick them. A lot of Central and South America. They are our allies, and we're saying we will help you with things and you'll help us with stuff, and because those people are the bad guys. China wants to take over the world. China wants to be the superpower. China and Russia are a convenient friendship right now. I don't think that's China's long-term plan. I think they're going to start. They want to take over some of Russia and say, "No, we think this is China." So that's like their 100-year plan or 50-year plan. So my point is, there are bad actors. Like Germany was a bad actor in World War II, and then we said the Soviet Union were the bad actors during the Cold War, and we said we are going to fight them, and you are going to be on our side or their side. And if we just abandon everyone, and we are the only superpower, and we say fend for yourself, they are going to capitulate to someone, because France, England, Germany, none of these countries are big enough to deal with China specifically. Russia's more of a paper tiger than I think we thought they were. And I think, honestly,
they are.
Putin some truth serum.
Saying
he might actually want a peace deal more than Ukraine, because
I think so too.
I think they're lying about all sorts of problems they're having.
Well, they're lying about their equipment. They're lying about their people. They're lying about, they don't have enough soldiers. They don't have enough food to feed the soldiers. They don't,
North Koreans in there now.
Yes. And North Koreans that are defecting.
And my point is, my point is, if we have to pay a little money and Ukrainians are taking out North Koreans and Russians and destroying their equipment and weakening them militarily, that feels like a great deal to me. And I'm not saying I want war to happen. I would prefer that it never happened. But again, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine. It was not, Ukraine didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying, people are like, oh, they're corrupt and stuff. They've only been a country for 30 years, guys, and they came from the Soviet Union. They're working it out, but they want to be a little spicy democracy. They want to be like Israel, essentially. And I just think we should absolutely we should always have the back of a democracy that's surrounded by people that hate them. And that's why I think we should back Israel. And that's why I think we should back Ukraine. And that's why I think we should back, lots of little countries that are little desert oases.
I don't say that we shouldn't back Ukraine, but I think sending money to fight a war that is never going to be won, and I understand your point behind it.
I don't agree that it can't be won. I think if Biden would have done the things that Ukraine asked for in time and not waited 6 months on everything, I think Ukraine would have done a lot better.
If we were to allow them to use the weapons that we have, that there would have been retaliation on the West.
But here's my thing. I think Russia should be scared of us. We shouldn't be scared of Russia.
Well, so if they stop the war, why would we be upset? Do you really think, like you said, okay, what if they invade Poland? But they can't even handle Ukraine.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, except that if we give them Ukraine and they didn't really win it, if we just give it to them.
I'm not saying we give it to them. I'm saying Ukraine needs to stay where it's at. Russia needs to stay where it's at. But they need to come to peace.
Give them the 20% of the country the territory that they're in, they could still potentially want to do that land bridge. And so they don't even have to take over the whole of Ukraine to try to pull that to going into one of these other countries that are also independent. And some of them.
I still think, like Poland, the way that they've put up their defense, I think they'd slap the shit out of Russia right now.
They probably would, but we're going to have to answer that call, is my point is.
If it comes, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to.
No, I don't want to either.
I'd rather Russia not. I think Russia hasn't done it because they think we'll beat their ass.
Turning into a nationalist, and I think it's just because of all the things I've seen over my life and how much shit we give to other countries and what we get in return is little to nothing. We've been supporting countries. We've been supporting the Middle East for my entire life, and it's still a war zone.
I think you say that, but look at the GDP increases. Look at the quality of life. Look at what even the poorest Americans all have cars and houses and phones and are fed. And I realize that's not always the case. A lot of them do.
No, they don't. I can tell you. I could go down to the next big city here, and
every homeless person I see has a cell phone. I live down to downtown.
That's because Obama gave them to him.
I know, but
I'm just saying.
My point is that we are rich because of trade. And we have not, the things we have lost, we have gained much more. People are only looking at we don't have the automobile industry that we used to, although we do. We just have fewer people working in them than we used to. And my point is that we have benefited from this, and we will learn that we had, but it'll be too late. We will have an economic problem at that point. And I don't think that this has been some charity thing. I think we have gotten much more in return than we've ever given, including for the security stuff. And that includes, the world is different without the sacrifices that people made in World War II. It's it's a different place for the worse. Okay. I mean, it is a better place because we got involved in World War II. It's the worst. The Japanese probably sorely regret attacking us because we were pretty isolationist before that happened. And I just look at and go, we have been preventing World War III for 80 years now. And I think people have gotten too complacent with that's just the way that it goes. And it's really easy to criticize all the things that have kept that going for 80 years. And I think if we abandon all the things that we've done for 80 years, I think inevitably bad things will happen. I don't think that we were being the world's police because we wanted to be bullies. I think we were being the world's police, and sometimes we took it too far. Look, I mean, I think the Iraq war was a mistake. I don't think that was a good war to be in. I don't feel that way about Afghanistan. I think we screwed the pooch on exiting Afghanistan. We've done that twice now. We did that in the Cold War with the Taliban and basically created the people that hated us because we didn't support them.
Yep.
And that the Taliban and terrorism exist essentially because we didn't build them schools, because we didn't do the little bit of work that it would have taken for us to be the good guys in Afghanistan. And I just go like, that's a huge mistake that we made in the 80s.
But you're making an assumption there that it would have been better had we done that. And I think with the type of culture they have there, it probably would not have. We still would have been the West. We still would have been, the white devil, so to speak.
No, but I don't think that. I think in the 80s we had the chance to actually turn around the Middle East, and we blew it. I think we really could have changed Afghanistan in the 80s. I think that it was too hard to do by the time 9/11 happened and stuff, because there's a whole different thing going on in the Muslim world of all that, the different sects, and that the like enemy of my enemy is my friend and all this kind of weird stuff. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on, but that escalates significantly from the 1970s on. I mean, Iran was a free country essentially until it was in 1978 or 9 that the revolution was. So, that's not ancient history. That's a few years before we were born.
You know what, though? The one thing where I think changed the trajectory of what we were doing in the world, and this is where I really think that it changed to probably having more people look negatively on us, was Vietnam.
Agree with that. Totally agree with that. But again, that was a war that we got into and we couldn't figure out how to get out of it, so we just kept going.
Yep.
That was unjust because what we were doing is sending people to die knowing that this did not end up the way we wanted it to be.
There was very little chance for democracy to prevail there.
And we knew that 3 presidents in a row knew that and kept it going.
Yep.
That was the scandal of Vietnam. And you're right. And that was where a lot of people lost. I think there was some really bad stuff that happened and the fact that they were like blaming the soldiers for it who were drafted. That's to me one of the worst stains.
One of the worst war on American history.
It's not even just the war. It's the way we treated the people that had to go fight in that war, that we forced to do so. To me, it's on par. I feel like it's on par with like slavery and Jim Crow stuff. I really do, because and to me, most of that, the reason you don't hear about it as much, because it was the left that was the progressive left that was protesting stuff, and they were the ones that were literally, mad at the soldiers, again, who were forced to go over there and fight a war that they had no control over, no choice over. It's basically slavery.
Yeah.
If it's a just war, it's one thing. Look, there were people. You didn't have to have a draft in World War II to get American troops to go fight that war. They knew it was just.
We knew.
There were there's so many stories of 15-year-olds that lied about their age to go fight and stuff.
My grandfather was 17 when he went off to war. So
right, can you imagine that now? Like, I have an 11-year-old. It's insane to me to think about, like, in 6 years, or 4 or 5 years, if she's a boy, I guess, because at the time, lying to go fight a war.
Yeah.
A war that they're probably going to die in, there's a decent chance, much more decent chance then than now. And I just go, gosh, that's like, right. I think Vietnam was a huge turning point. But the problem is, like, I do think we learned the lesson from that, because people tried to compare like Iraq to Vietnam. It's like, it's not anywhere near Vietnam. It's not even close to, it's like 3,000 people died in Iraq, and it was what?
Yeah. Death wise. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of similarities in. Well, maybe not, because Iraq, we were there on false pretenses.
Well,
right?
I think it was a mistake. I always remind people, everyone in the world thought he had the weapons of mass destruction.
Everybody
They
did.
were just debating whether we should go in and get them or not. No one disagreed that they had them. People think Bush lied about it. It's like, no, everyone's intelligent.
Everyone thought they had it.
Everyone thought that the argument was not, do they have them, do they not have them? Because he was claiming
It's
he
where
had
are
them.
they? Yeah.
It's where are they, and should we go in to get them? Do we use military force to go in and get them? And this is because NATO was, going to have our back on the Afghanistan thing for sure. And so, to me, you go, it's not the same thing. Now, I do think it was a mistake in the end, but it was a mistake based on bad intelligence, and we should have been better at it. but it wasn't. I don't think it was nefarious.
No,
Unfortunately,
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it was.
Yeah.
No.
And so
I
I
think
understand why
based on
people.
the information we had at the time, I think it was the right decision to make. But
So I
hindsight's
think
always 2020,
exactly,
right?
and I think Trump and most of his supporters are. That is the taste in their mouth. It's like the Iraq War and that kind of stuff. We kind of bungled a lot of that stuff, and they go, "We don't want to be in these forever wars." And I totally
Yep.
get that sentiment.
And I think, you know what? I think that's kind of where I'm coming from
Yeah,
because I've
and I
seen
get
these
that.
wars come up. I say, well, I grew up in the Cold War, just the tail end of it, and seen the Berlin Wall fall, and then all these skirmishes in the Middle East. We've had skirmishes in Africa and
Yep.
everywhere. And it's just
Yep.
like, at what point do we just say, guys, you're gonna have to do it for yourself for a while.
Yeah, I think the problem is
know?
that the other countries just can't do it by themselves, and so China will
And I mean,
win.
yeah,
So
that's
we
the bad
are
thing,
going to
'cause you sit there and
capitulate
you
to
go,
them.
if you're not willing, because one thing that I've always had trouble with is, and I think about it from a totally different area, and I realize this is like refugees, people that are leaving war-torn countries and just leave their homes like that. I'm like, I'm sorry, but for me, I'm staying and fighting.
Yeah. But I
And
mean,
it's just,
but then again, that's what Ukraine is doing. And then we're saying, like, some people are just like, we don't want to support those people. And I just go, like, I want to support small democracies anywhere that want like a more American world order. They want to be in NATO. Like they're very pro-American, and they're also pro-America, helping them
I
be
see what
better
you're
at
saying there.
democracy.
Yeah.
And just like Israel is, like Israel is this
I
like
think
tiny little
it
island
just,
of democracy in the world of the Middle East.
it
And I
just
go,
comes down to with, Ukraine, with how Zelensky got in there in the first place, right? He was installed
he got
by our
elected. He didn't
government.
get, no, he got
He
elected.
was in,
That's not true. He was
the
not installed.
he got
It's not true.
elected, but
got
he was
elected because
installed by our government
no,
because
he was
our
not.
government forced out the last leaders.
That's not true. We
It
did not
is
force them out.
true.
It's not true. We didn't force
It
them
is.
out. It's not true. There was no coup. That is Russian propaganda. That was a
It's,
Russian. No, it was. It didn't happen. I'm telling you, it did not. That is
I've
not. Is Russia
heard
propaganda?
from
That
some military people that I work with that are intelligence officers that we definitely were involved in that.
I would like to see the evidence that it happened, because all the evidence I've ever seen is easily
Well,
debunked.
do you think our government is going to let out evidence?
I do, because they're
that we take a
terrible
coup?
at covering stuff up. They're terrible at it. Everyone thinks the government can do all these crazy secrecy things. They can't do it, and it didn't happen. That whole thing was, and I'm getting some of the years mixed up, and we don't have to get into it. But like
No,
that whole thing is literally Russian propaganda. Like I can find the thing that says this is what Russia says, and then we've started towing that line. Some of the people on the right, even though it's literally just like Russian made up propaganda. And there's these coincidences. One of the coincidences is like, oh, the police were firing at both people. It's like it was a riot. Like again, there's chaos. Like, and we don't know that the police were firing at. They just were fired at by someone. Like there's no evidence that there was this coup. And by the way, that person was ran out by the people because they were a Russian stooge. I mean, that's what really happened. It was the people forced them out because they ran and were elected as this like, and then all of a sudden they realized they were a Russian puppet that was in there, and they forced them out. And that was not a coup. And even if it was, it was a Ukrainian one. I mean, we've certainly been involved in coups and stuff like that, and that is where I'm like, there are some fine lines there. It's like sometimes it works well, sometimes it's the right move. I think generally it's not. I don't think it's ever really worked out super well.
We have a bad track record. Let's put it that way.
Right. I would rather us just vocally out loud say we support this guy because he's pro-democracy, and we don't support the other one. That's what I really like. Just put our weight behind it. You all figure it out, but like, here's what we think. We think Putin, for example, is not for democracy. We don't think he's for you. We think he's killing you. We think he kills his enemies.
Yeah, I mean, and come on, this guy who always has his political opponents show up dead. Right.
They're always So like or even saying that, like cheering against Bashar al-Assad in Syria is fine with me. To be like, he's the villain and we like the other guy better, or in Syria, like any of these places where we do these kind of things. I think those are like, we should do it out in the open. That's where I would like transparency.
Definitely don't think we should do it behind the
but we have to do some of this stuff. I think if we stop, I think we'll realize there's a reason we were doing it. And sure, we've made mistakes. We've not been perfect at it. We've done very bad things. Like, I'm not saying we haven't. I think most of the time we were trying to preserve the world order, and people should be held responsible for that regardless. I'm also fine with that. You should be held responsible for the things you do. Sometimes you have to make a hard decision, especially as the president of the United States. Like, I realize it's a tough job. It's the reason I don't want it. But
yeah, you and me both. But at what point do we hold the rest of the world accountable as well?
I guess it depends what you mean by accountable, because like Europe is spending more of their GDP than we are in Ukraine, so they are spending more money than we are.
They are now.
Dollars. But they were immediately. No, they were immediately.
I mean, I'm sorry, dollars is dollars. You know, you can say, oh, percentage of GDP, but I mean, come on.
Well, but we've got
$1 million and $1 million is $1 million.
No, but it's not when we've got 300 million people and some of these countries have a few million people. Like some of them don't California would be a bigger country than almost everything in Europe.
Well, its economy is bigger than most.
Right. And so my point is it does matter. You do have to go per capita because it's like Poland is doing something like 6 or 7% of their budget being military now. Yeah, it's a smaller dollar amount than us, but they've got less land, fewer people. Like they don't need the number of weapons we have and the number of defenses. So to me, you go, okay, I agree.
But you know, you can make the argument we don't need as many weapons as we do because we have oceans surrounding us.
Well, except that I would say I'd rather be prepared.
Well, I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. You know.
Now I'm the traditional conservative that says, look, Europe, we have been subsidizing European social stuff by letting them not pay what they're supposed to pay.
Yes.
Spend on their military budgets and letting them lean on us to defend them. And that I'm for all changing. My point is that none of this that we're doing is really making that change. There's a better way to do that. The better way to do that is say, like, we're going to hold you to it. We're just going to, we are not going to defend you if you don't hit the percentages that we say you need to hit, that we all agreed on, then we're not going to defend you. Like, it's just as simple as that. Like,
and
to me, you don't
I'd be
have
fine
to
with
do
that. I think that would be a fair compromise. It's like, listen, you're in a club, right? Essentially, there's membership dues. We all agreed on them. You know, it's not like these are a surprise. And you need to either start paying yourself, or if you don't, you won't get the support.
And I do think that will be the one silver lining in how all this is shaken out. I do think Germany and France and England are going to step up significantly. And I think
that's the only positive thing I could see out of the whole thing so far.
But like the thing is, Germany and France and these companies, they're going to start nuclear arming small countries like Ukraine if they want to. And there's going to be nothing we can do to stop it if we bail on NATO, if we bail on Ukraine. And they go, look, it's in our strategic best interest to have a little padding between us and Russia. And so we're going to arm Ukraine to the tilt. And you know, we might be fine with that, except that I would rather us be in the driver's seat than China and Germany and France and England and a bunch of different countries that you're one election away potentially from having someone that, it's funny, someone said on Twitter, someone was like, wait a minute, someone's begging the Germans to rearm and possibly invade Poland? Are you...
Well, you know, and that's part of my thing, you know, because I remember from Iraq that, you know, when we went in the first time, they were using our own weapons against us because we supplied them in the 80s, right? We supplied their weapons. So who's to say the same thing is not going to happen with Ukraine down the road?
Yeah, and it certainly could. You have to roll the dice sometimes on that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, it's not. It's not ideal. But
I think you've made some really good points because I do agree. You know, obviously, I don't want Russia to take over Ukraine. I don't think that that's right. You know, they're a sovereign nation on their own right, you know, to be there. I'm still of the opinion that I really don't care how it started, but it needs to end. I think that should be the number one for anybody. I think that should be our number one goal. I agree with you. It shouldn't be one-sided. It should be very neutral. You know, if we're there, we're only there as a neutral party to say, hey, you guys got to work this out, you know?
Okay, so this will be my last question then but because we've been doing this for way too long, you're going to have to split this in like 3 episodes.
Yeah, I know.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I love it. This is great.
So here's my question, though. Do you feel that the pressure should be on Israel or Hamas to end that conflict?
The pressure?
Yeah. Like
that's a very tough one.
Because who can end it?
Yeah, I mean, if you want my honest opinion, I think Israel should just wipe Hamas off the map.
Right, because Hamas are the bad guys that
and just
Israel
like you
first.
said, you know, and okay, I see where you're going and they had an agreement, right? And Hamas always breaks the agreement.
Always.
Right? And most times.
Always.
I think it is always, yeah. Hamas
well, this
breaks
last
the
time they're going to claim that Israel did.
It was Israel, but
it was because they weren't giving hostages back, and they were lying, and they were doing egregious things with the bodies too.
They were.
Like they had a fake body. It wasn't the person they said it was. They've broken every ceasefire they've ever broke. Like they've broken every
single
agreement.
one has been them.
And their charter is, you know, they want to kill every Jew in the world. So they're never going to stop. No. You have to eliminate them. Yeah. Russia wants the Soviet Union. Putin wants the Soviet Union back.
Yeah, I know.
Until people throw him out of power, that's what he's going to go after. So he's not going to stop at Ukraine. He's not going to stop at 20% of Ukraine. He's not going to stop. He's going to go to Belarus and all these other places too, okay? And he's going to make a road across Poland. That's what he wants to do. When he's the aggressor, to me, that means we got to put pressure on Russia. Now, I don't think you go, we're going to nuke Russia. It's a little like Hamas, you can eliminate.
Yeah.
Hamas cannot control Gaza. They cannot
No,
control Gaza. They
no,
cannot be
they
politically in
can't.
control.
We've tried it. I mean,
Didn't
time and
work.
time and time again, and nothing. Yeah,
And so you have to say, like, to me, that's the only solution. Hamas, there is no solution in the Israel Gaza thing without completely eliminating Hamas. That's the only way. Now they can surrender and walk away, and we'll ship you off to Qatar or whatever,
yeah.
and you can live there, but you cannot run. You can't be in Gaza. And to me, it's the same thing. You got to go. We're not. That's my problem, is that Trump is not putting any pressure on Russia. And I think it's because he wants to be like Putin. I think that's basically, he would love to be able to just throw his weight around and be a bully. And I think that also there's this, another theory from Nick Cataggio at the Dispatch is that, like, all nationalist movements in this way, where they have to have territorial expansion, and that's why Donald Trump is so obsessed with Greenland and the Panama Canal and making Canada the 51st state. Because
I understand Greenland. I've heard from, like I said, I got some buddies that are strategically,
strategically, I was for it. Like,
yeah.
I'm not for invading it. I think we should have bought it.
I am not for invading anything. No. I am not for, forcefully purchasing anything. My thing is, if anybody wanted to come join the United States, I think, depending on who it was, I'd be for it. Like, if Canada said, hey, we want to be the 51st state.
Yeah,
all right, awesome.
I'd want
them
to be
out.
I'd need them to be like 10 states, maybe.
Yeah, I would not make them one state.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
but yeah, especially for conservatism, by the way.
I don't think we should be the people that are going and take, because then we're just like a dictatorship.
Right, but that's the problem. But if you know, that is what Trump is talking about. He wants to take Greenland, because he, like, even in his little State of the Union or whatever it's really called, address to Congress, he's like, we'll get it one way or another. That's a threat. That's a threat to Greenland of military engagement. And he's doing the same to Canada, and he's doing the same. He's like, no, they can just capitulate and say they want to be the 51st state, or we can do it the hard way. He wants to be like Russia. He wants to be like China. He wants to have these, because he knows that he has to.
I don't agree with that, because,
And to me, when people try to say he wants anything else other than I think he wants to let Russia have its little territory and have China have its little territory and us have our little territory. A really good theory of this is that Donald Trump's inspiration politically is mob bosses. Like, this is who he was like.
I got it.
This is
yeah, that makes sense.
What they do is they respect each other, and they don't piss on each other's territory, but they are the boss inside there, and they demand respect from each other. And, like, it all makes a lot of sense when you start thinking about it's like New York mob kind of culture. That is what Donald Trump was influenced by.
That kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
He wants to be the Don. He wants to be the king. He wants to be the one that everyone licks their boots.
Yeah.
That's why he cares about loyalty. And so my point is, he does not have a grand plan for America's best interest. He has it just for his own best interest. And I think I think it's going to be a problem. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope he gets reined in by people. But
I think that's where I'm like, I don't disagree with you. I could totally see that happening. I mean, I don't put anything past any of our politicians, any people in elected at all.
Right.
Well,
especially when you keep telling me out loud what you really want to do. I don't believe the 3D chess that you're not telling us. I believe the part that you're saying out loud. Like, it makes sense to me.
Exactly.
That's what he wants to do.
Yeah. But my hope, the better side of me is that that's not what he's looking for. I really hope that something good does come for the American people. I'm never going to, even when Biden was in, I'm never going to vote against America, ever.
Right. I would like good things to happen here.
I want to see us succeed no matter who's in office.
Yep. And I would love,
but you're right. I
think the only way that happens is Republicans in Congress saying, hey, we're taking away your tariff ability, because you're going to screw up a lot of stuff. And I think you will see a pushback at some point, potentially.
At some point, yeah.
Once they're starting feeling like they're not going to get reelected. Because again, that's what they want. And I think that they will start trying to figure out a way to tell Trump he's wrong, but make him think that he came up with the solution, and they'll give him all the praise for it. They'll make him think he came up with the idea. But really, I think at some point they have to say, this is not working with the tariffs. This is not working the way you're doing diplomacy. This is not working the way you're ripping up international agreements that we've had for 80 years. And even just on the stuff, like I said, the Matt Gaetz thing, help him get out of his own way. Sometimes he can be his own worst enemy. And
you're absolutely right.
If he just listens to people around him that want him to do well, like I said, these are not his enemies. These are people that go, we want to see you succeed. We just don't think you can do it with Matt Gaetz. And he should listen to those people more. And those people should be more willing to speak up. And again, that falls back to us to go in a couple years. If we don't think they're doing that,
exactly,
which I think is what will happen, is that they will lose the House and the Senate, because mostly it's a rejection of one party. It's not an embrace of the other. Of course, I don't think Democrats, like, people are like, well, who are the Democrats? How are they going to get their stuff together? Well, I don't think they have to. I think that Republicans just have to do a poor enough job that people go, okay, we'll give them another shot. I think that's what we've been doing back and forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
we've been doing the same thing for the last 20 years. So
no one has been like an amazing like force in Congress. Like Donald Trump basically got a tax cut. Barack Obama basically got the Obamacare. Joe Biden basically got his sort of Inflation Reduction Act and the stimulus thing, both of which were inflationary and caused all sorts of problems for him in the end. Most people are not getting but one thing.
One big thing,
in Congress, they're not getting a lot done. No one's getting a lot done, and people are mad about that. And they're just rejecting the people that don't get stuff done that they say they're going to get done. And I think that we're going to be in this I don't think we're just going to have some magical leader in 2026, 2028 that's going to change the course of that. I think it unfortunately takes like a disaster or something, or a good leader could help. I just don't think it is
going to be interesting to see what 2028 is going to bring. And we can end after this, Blake. But 2028 is going to be kind of a new territory for us, because it's going to be the first time, really, that Trump, I hope, is not campaigning.
You better not be. But would that be the line in the sand if he tries to run for a third term? Are you going to say that, like, okay, that's definitely a coup?
I've already said this. So I've already said, listen, our Constitution is very specific. Well, it sometimes is broad, but it's very specific in what things can do. And it's very specific that the president can only have 2 terms. And unless you change the Constitution, then
which isn't going to happen.
He only gets, this is his last term, but the weird, and when I say hopefully not, he's still going to, whoever the Republican candidate's going to be, he's probably going to, depending on how his presidency goes, campaign for them.
That's going to be the question. Well, not campaign for them. He's going to handpick them and tell his people what to do.
Well, and that's
if
the
he
question,
still has that power, but
he
may not.
Who's the next guy? Is it going to be J.D. Vance? Is it going to be someone else from our party? I know that the Democrat Party has no idea who's going in 2028. And I got to be honest with you, unless they can rebrand themselves, they're not really going to have a chance.
But I think Republicans might have the exact same problem.
You think so?
We're thinking about that right now, like barely into Trump's administration. J.D. Vance may be the last person. It doesn't happen very often that vice presidents become president. It's like 4 out of 12 that have done it. It's not a high percentage. You go down with, Kamala Harris went down with the ship. Now, I think she could have done some things better to avoid that, but not entirely. I think that you can't say you're not part of the administration when you're part of it. So if Donald Trump's administration is unpopular at the end of this, I don't think J.D. Vance has a chance.
You're right. And
especially
that's why I said based on how the presidency goes. Yeah.
So we will have no idea. We won't have a clue in 2026. People never have the nominees right 2 years out. So we're not going to know. We'll know more about how Trump's term is going in 2026, but we won't know because of that, who's the Republican nominee in 2028 is going to be.
Because really it's going to depend on what happens during that 2026 to 2027 year. That's really going to, I think, lead where we're going to be, right?
And again, I would love to see the people of the United States stand up and go, this is enough. We're going to actually demand better leadership. We're going to demand people that do stuff. We're going to fire people in Congress. We're going to demand that you all do the job right. And I would love to see something like that. I just don't think it'll happen I don't think that meaty bell curve of the normal people are going to do that together. I think it'll just be left and right against each other again. And that's just not really working.
Yeah, I hope at some point we can find some common ground with our friends on the left, and get back together and at least do some things, get some things done for the country that actually do good. Most of the best bills, have been bipartisan bills.
Well, they have to be. And, it's just the nature of it.
Yeah, this whole one side versus the other. It's like, listen, we're Americans. Yes, we have ideas that we want to go, but we're not so irresponsible or unapproachable that we can't have a good conversation like you and I just had, and just talk about things. And even if we agree or disagree, it doesn't matter, but we're going to find more stuff that we agree on. And that's my whole point, is we need to just start working together.
Yeah, but people like us don't vote in primaries is the problem. I do,
true.
But I'm saying most of the rational people don't do that. And so they are held hostage by this tiny percentage of their party that says you can't ever compromise. That's the thing that's identical on both sides, is that AOC ousted the third most powerful Democrat in the House when she ran, because it was like, well, you're too squishy. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to get rid of you. And that's what's happening now on both the left and the right. And so you can't fix that unless voters show up and elect.
Exactly.
Which is why I'd love to change the primary system. But with the way we have it right now, until more normal people show up in primaries, you will continue to get really bad candidates. You'll continue to have Congress that won't do their job because they're scared of being primaried, not losing a general election.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. So Blake, let's wrap this up. What
you're
what do you got coming up? Anything?
Sure.
Anything coming up for you? Anything new?
Just you can follow on YouTube at The Homeless Conservative, or Instagram at the same thing, or the podcast is everywhere podcasts are. And just I'm trying to be a reasonable voice that says this is good, this is bad, or in my opinion. And maybe it's one more opinion you have in the tank to go, oh, that's interesting. You don't have to agree with it. It's totally fine with me. In fact, I welcome the discussion. You know what I mean? It would be boring if, like I said,
this is the whole point. This is why I love doing this show. My show is to have people on like you that we could see where we are very similar. We may not agree on everything, but we had a good conversation. People could take this conversation, take from it what you like. You don't have to take what you don't, but we're just here, and I'd welcome anybody to be on the show or converse with either of us, through our social media, through our platforms. We want to hear your opinions. We want to hear what you're thinking. We know we're not right. I definitely, sorry, I'm speaking for you, Blake, but
no,
we know
I'm not right
we've
on
said
everything.
it a couple of times. Yeah, we know we're not right, and a lot of times our opinions can be wrong. But we're going to try to do what's best for ourselves. I think that's the only thing that
Everyone
anybody
is.
can do.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to make sure that we're at least truthful to as much as we can be, and we invite any views, really. So.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do, is give people a place that if you feel like a homeless conservative, because you're like, well, I believe in this stuff, but it doesn't feel like the Republican Party does believe in that stuff anymore. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm still a Republican. I would still like to see the Republican Party change back to, some of those things. But so that's what I'm trying to do. Get other like-minded people a place to not be outraged and fear-mongered all the time.
Excellent. Well, Blake, thanks again. All your information is going to be on my website, justadudepodcast.com. So you'll have a guest spot there with all your links and your photo. And so that'll be there for the listeners as well. But I just want to thank you for coming on. I thought this was a great discussion. All right, my fellow dudes and dudettes, that wraps up another episode of Just a Dude Podcast. I want to give a big shout out to Blake Fischer for dropping by and giving us a dose of political insight with a side of down-to-earth wisdom. Remember, whether you're conservative, liberal, or somewhere in between, it's all about keeping the conversation real and staying true to who you are. If you like what you heard, give us a follow, leave a review, or hit us up with your thoughts for the next episode. Until then, stay curious, stay authentic, and keep being just a dude or a dudette. I've been Nathan, signing off, and catch you next time.